Another round will bring you down. Another round won't save you now.
Yeah, reverse sweep coming up.
Big win for the Camelot Kings here, Dan. The Valkyries have done it not since week 2. It is the deicide for the Oni Warriors, and they have pulled this game back from the brink.
But the rest of the Solar Scarabs follow up. Down go the Titan. And Labra's got the first. What a 1-2 punch from the Bolts.
The damage comes from the Leviathans until Zapman puts them down with the snipe.
Defend their Titan, and the Tartarus Titan send us on to a game 3.
The Jade Dragons have come to play. 5 kills in 7 minutes.
Good afternoon, Smite fans, and welcome back to day number 2 of week 2 of the third phase of the SPL, powered by our title sponsor and good friends at Alienware. If you want to get your hands on some of their sweet gear like the Aurora Ryzen 10 desktop, the 25-inch 240Hz gaming monitor, or anything else that Alienware has to offer, you can go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW in order to check out all the cool coupons and discount codes they have available. You can also follow them on their social media at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram, or go to their website at alienwarearena.com and join their ever-growing global community. There we go. I had to get it right the second time around. Eventually, you do get that. It's Jim Max Tucker joining me here today to get started out. It's going to be Gorham Miser. We've got the Oni Warriors and the Solar Scarabs as our first matchup of the day. Sure to be a big one, especially with how the Scarabs have just kind of jumped up, basically seemingly kind of out of nowhere. We'll take a look at the schedule, see all the action that we have for you today. As I highlighted, it's the Oni Warriors and Scarabs up first, and the Jade Dragons and the Atlantis Leviathans here in studio for our second match of the day. And it should be a big one because they're fighting for a huge spot in the standings. Both of these teams sitting at the top of the charts.
Yeah, this is going to be a good day of Smite. Like, just blanket statement, I think every single one of these games should be entertaining. And I'm really intrigued to see with the Scarabs being 0-2, but having put up some really interesting fights in that 0-2, it makes things a little more heavy-handed, I think, for what we're going to see. The Warriors had a really good performance against the Bolts, then later in the week didn't quite hit the same stride. And so I'm curious which one of them we're going to see. This is also very worth noting the only matchup that they have this week, so they've only been able to channel their energy into studying the Scarabs, watching those games, and so that makes things more interesting. But like you said, later on, first and second is like the most important that you can have right now in the round robin stage, and since the Leviathans and Dragons are still fighting for that, I guess technically the Titans in there as well, it makes that second set have a lot of weight behind it.
And it's one of those big things, you know, with this being a single round robin, you only play everybody once, so it's important that you get your win now because you don't get a second opportunity until potentially group stage. And with those top 2 teams getting to pick the other team's groups, it's kind of a pick your poison. So win or lose today, even if you don't make it into that, that top 2 for these 2 teams, having a big showing here could be that deciding factor of, does a team want you in their bracket, or do you want them in the opponent's bracket because they might be a little scared of what you're able to bring out against them?
And again, I think I said this yesterday, but you have to go and look back at what happened in Phase 1 when we did a very similar format, which is that the Kings didn't make it to the playoffs because of the Scarabs finding a very big win up against them and causing a little bit of turmoil there. So that is the kind of thing that really changes up when you're looking not just into group stages, but then you're looking at the Phase 2 playoffs, you're looking at world seeding, things like that. Every single one of these matters. If you're the Scarabs and you're the Warriors right now, you're at 0-2, getting a single win, a set win, is going to be huge.
And with these 2 teams, kind of a lot of things have really changed up amongst everybody, and we've been seeing a huge improvement from really both these teams. The big performance from the Bolts, or against the Bolts, I should say, for the Oni Warriors, but for the Solar Scarabs, with a lot of the charisma that Bobby has brought to this team, he's also been bringing a lot of leadership on the battlefield. He's been a pillar frontline for this team, and he's been able to make it so on gods that previously, it's one of those, you don't want him to pick this guy because he hasn't had the greatest performance on it. Now, I'm kind of terrified to give him just about any god, including this Umoja. Bobby has really stepped it up here in Phase 3, has really made it look like this Umoja didn't have the win-loss record, and while it may not still be the most successful on the win-loss category, he's still been putting in some stellar work on this god and just in general for the support role.
Yeah, a lot of the plays versus the Kings were really interesting earlier this week when they played. In Game 1, you could definitely feel things starting to slip out of their hand, although they kept it contested for a lot of the game. Game 2, of course, they won, and they were willing to change things up, not just inbound, but you also have some really good plays coming out of the jungle, and I think that's where things have gotten interesting for them. You're bringing Tiny and this Yamoja, which, if I'm looking back on it, I think we saw Terra come through. Sylvanas was being played, I think, by Inbound earlier, which it's a lot of these picks that maybe aren't going to be or should not be banned. I'm thinking of Geb as well. Yesterday was big in the Dragon set. I wouldn't be surprised to see if Bobby has that in his pocket. I think there's a lot of saving plays that we've seen lately that make it a lot more interesting to watch the Scarabs, and I'm really going to keep my eye on their mid 3v3 because I think that has just done nothing but enhance.
Well, we've been seeing a lot of diversity from the Scarabs and their support. Even Neilma has been making some waves for the Oni Warriors, able to kind of swap around his god pull. He'll play the meta when it's there. He'll play the Kepris. He'll play the Emojis. But we've been seeing a lot of the Kuzenbo out of him recently in their matchup against the Bolts. I believe it was all 3 games that we saw Kuzenbo from him. So very curious to see if we'll see that banned away here against the Scarabs.
And that's the key. I'm interested to see what they're going to play today because the Kuzenbo, as you had mentioned, not only banned in most of those games, but picked in most of those games, banned in the next set, and in the next set they didn't look anything like they did the time prior. So if it is all dependent on getting this Kuzenbo, that makes it a very easy opening ban for the Scarabs to slow down and lock up what the Oni Warriors have been able to pick up. I also think we saw a little bit of Kuzenbo solo yesterday, so maybe that's something that is a conversation. Maybe strip that away, give it to someone like Sot and see what he can do with it. But I also think that it is a very essential, I guess, look at the Warriors, which is that Neil Ma is kind of a linchpin. I also think we're entering a stage of the jungle, which is going to be interesting to see how Neil can handle it, where he's roaming around, but also how Cuvo's going to handle that in tandem, because you can't have Neil be the only thing holding it together and maybe helping guide them to victory. Of course, that's never been the case. Nika, as well, on the other side of the map, has always been providing a lot. But if Cuvo can step up with this patch as well, then we find ourselves maybe a completely different Oni Warriors today than we've gotten to see even in the last few months.
I mean, we saw a solid core 3 coming out from the Oni Warriors. It was Neil on the Kuzenbo, then we had Nika piloting the Cerberus, and you had Cuvo taking up, I think it was the Erlong Shen was the guy that he was really heavy prioritizing. That core 3 stuck strong against the Bolts and really made them look good, but then we saw a lot of changes in that next set that didn't look as hot for them, and they weren't able to have as much success. We'll see if they have some success today. We have Neil Moss standing by for our pregame interview. Talked a little bit about it. Neil, is that a little bit of a change of scenery I see back there? You finally made it down.
Of course, I've laid claim to the kitchen. It's my domain. And, I mean, if I get hungry, I can just pop over there, look in the fridge, the pantry, can wash my hands, It's just my world.
Yeah, it's your world. It's your place to live, so hopefully it works out for you in the kitchen. You talk about, how is it being down here, aside from the fact that you now got to play inside the kitchen?
I mean, it's been good so far. I mean, yeah, Nika and Vote have been great. My only complaint is that if you use the microwave, it turns off your internet, so that's not ideal, but we'll figure that out. May have just done that right now. Not a good way to learn about that. But so far, so good. The weather's great, and everyone's so nice and friendly.
Just make sure that nobody turns that off. We've been talking a lot about the jungle so far with 8.9, but there were some changes out of the support role that may be a little worth talking about. Talk to me a little bit about, some of your thoughts on the changes on the adjustments on the relics and maybe some of the changes with the starter items for that support role.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. I think it's a bit early to tell exactly how everything will be, but there's been a lot of change-ups in the way people build their relics to start. Like, for instance, I think we saw Mike the other day play Geb, didn't even bother going Blink. And as far as the starters, it's nice that there's a bit more variety. Again, people have been picking up Benevolence a little bit, Sentinels as well, so you have a nice sprinkle of both, whereas before it kind of felt like you had to go one or the other depending on the patch. So it'll be interesting to see going forward in these next few weeks what everyone decides to do. And whenever you have variety, it's always a great thing in SMITE. So it's been great so far.
Well, Neil, thanks so much for sitting down and talking with us. Good luck, and make sure none of your teammates turn on the microwave during the game. Good luck.
For sure. Thank you.
That's an interesting one to accidentally find out as the microwave shuts off the internet. Now teams know how to shut them down, quickly invade their apartment, and go ahead and turn on the microwave if you want to win a game.
Go visit the Warrior.
Just go quickly in the middle of your set, just go pay a visit to the Warriors and turn on their microwave. You might have a better shot. But in all honesty, having Neil down here probably a lot better off for the team, able to have that leadership immediately available to you instead of the very slight delay over a voice call. But now that Neil is here, still waiting for the rest of his team to join now, and the Warriors are only going to get stronger the closer that they get to having that full 5 together.
And again, I think it's a small step forward for them, but actually Neil is such a big part of this team, especially from what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, that I'm expecting a lot, maybe not like a significant amount of change, but a lot of these picks that we've been talking about maybe having more prowess, seeing a little bit more out of the support role, makes things a little more interesting, especially for this matchup, because they should, in theory, be very close together.
Well, just because based off the standings, they were both sitting 0-2, though that was a really rough 2 loss that the Scarabs had for theirs. I mean, they had, the Kings and the Titans that their first 2 losses to were 2 of those top 5
and each
teams.
wins 3.
Both of those teams are top 5, and those are ones that the Scarabs are looking to try and dethrone as it goes through for them, because Bobby himself said, hey, we feel it, we're a top 5 team, and if you're going to be a top 5 team, you got to find the one that you're going to get the win on. So far, hasn't found that same level of success. The Warriors also having some trouble getting some of those wins. They got a game against the Bolts, which is a big note for them. But now here up against the Solar Scarabs, could be seeing a lot of differences, a lot of switch-ups here in the picks and bans.
And I like the way that this is going to move forward, because yesterday, I'm going to harken to the Bolts Dragon set, because that one felt very much like it was an 8.9 shift, where you're getting Scotty bans, you're getting Geb first picks, things like that. Chiron, I think, was first picked in the first game as well. Like, a lot of things that changed up for these teams, whereas the last time the Scarabs played, and so far most of them, have been similar to these, much more gradual transition. But a lot of these picks, Thor bans were very important from the Kings to try and control Scream a little bit more. We had a good Tsukuyomi game out of Scream, and so I think there's a lot of potential behind where the Scarabs are, because they have opened up, this patch has opened up, I think, a lot more that fits their style of play and is going to make things a little more difficult, specifically for the Warriors to manage.
Yeah, I mean, in our first day of play, we got to see a ton of God diversity, but really it was that Dragon's Bolt set that really felt like that is the impact of the new patch. Sure, we got to see a couple of Assassins in the first set, not going to take anything away from that first Scarab set that we did get to see, but interested to see how it's going to change up for the Warriors now that they're having their chance here on this new patch. Neil doesn't seem like he needs to change up his God pool too much. I'm curious mostly to see where Cuvo Fred goes back, because he's been playing a lot of the Warriors. I know Nike is a god that he sometimes even likes to splash in, but now that the Assassins are back, curious to see where everything lines up for these two teams. Let's hop right into picks and bans for game number 1 to see where all the pieces fall in place.
This is where things get a little more interesting, because when I think of the one Assassin that I think I love seeing the most, and we got to see a little bit yesterday, but in general, I just love Hunbats. Like, I always like watching Hunbats. He's really good at setting up plays. I feel like that fits Cuvo's style, and it's just meta enough right now that that's something I wouldn't mind them going towards. But we also saw, a Wheelish get buffs. You had mentioned it. Most of the Assassins are available. But that's the question mark I have for the Warriors, which is that we've had some really good games from Cuvo, and we've had some non-factor games from Cuvo. He likes to sit around and farm a lot early on. That's actually why I go to the Hunbats for him, because it's like someone that does really well late game, has a huge team impact, no matter what, realistically, but can still kind of follow the way that Cuvo's gameplay tends to evolve throughout the game. We'll see what he goes for, like you said. If that's even an assassin in his playbook, or if he's going to do an Osiris, go back to the year-long Shin, play something that we've been seeing over the last few weeks of play.
They've been recognizing that there is some problem here with the Warriors they need to deal with, and the Solar Scarabs are going to do 3 support bans up against Neil Mon. We'll even call that, the RDO most likely solo, but Neil was one of the few, maybe one of the only players who was playing out a support role at one point. So far, 4 Guardians banned out in the first round of picks between the Kuzenbo, Kepri, Yamoja, and then RTO and Hell on the other side for the Warriors. Still one more option available to them, but a lot of respect mostly here thrown towards Neil Ma.
And not only that, but I also think this indicates to me that the Scarabs are going to be driving this more towards either a Geb or a Sylvanas. Geb we saw be very, very prevalent yesterday in the second set, but the Sylvanas was really good for the Scarabs when they locked it in, and so maybe not something too surprising that they might go there. It also opens up this conversation for the Uller, which Stuart looked nuts on when he was playing it, to the point where it went from do we really have to worry about it, to a top 3 ban from the Kings. And so I actually really like the way they've kind of guided themselves here. I think they're playing into their strengths.
Yeah, it was one of those in game 1, it's like, okay, yeah, it kind of a nuisance, nothing too bad about it. Game 2, okay, yeah, we need to ban this going into game number 3. Game 3, Uller gets banned away from him. No shot that he got it back. So seeing Uller go from a basically non-factor, nobody was looking at this god aside from a couple of teams just picking him up just because, and now all of a sudden Uller is seeing top priority amongst the teams. Odin and the Morgan on the other side, but one god that was banned away so many times from the Solar Scarabs in their last set finally makes it through, and we finally get to see it. Bastet coming out here in the second pick.
I really like this draft right now from the Scarabs. I think we got to see a really good performance from the Uller the other day, so I'm expecting a lot from Stewart here, especially because most of the troubles he had were Netroid's ROM, which is something that's impossible to deal with to begin with. But you get a Bastet on top of that, Scream's signature pick, and he made it look good despite teams that didn't look good last year. So I have a lot of hopes for that one, as well as the Raijin, which I would argue, especially like contending Tiamat for the best one, in my eyes, maybe the best mid laner right now. I think this is a really, really good top 3 from the Scarabs.
The Morgan and Serket as a deadly combo for the Oni Warriors, even double Odin Cage if they decide to go that route. And looking at the bans for the second
Wait,
phase,
those are the supports I was talking about. You can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, you're not allowed to. They said, hey, that's a really good point you just made there, Gormaz.
We can't do that.
Let's go ahead and ban them away so we don't need to worry about it. Geb, that Polar Bear Mike piloted yesterday, had such a strong performance, especially with the changes to his ultimate, dealing with the percent and the flat damage. So for the first time ever, without the help of needing something like a Soul Reaver, you can actually kill somebody with that Cataclysm. Always a great feeling. In the Sylvanas, that was probably the hottest contest between at least the Scarabs and Kings matchup. All 3 games we saw prior to that Sylvanas. It'll get taken away. Solo Scarabs, they'll respond with an Izanami Artemis to strip that one away from Vote, but Vote's just fine with going with this Hachiman as his pick.
Well, now it's there's so many good supports taken away here. Like, you gotta, well, I mean, Ymir's actually still available. Hold on. Never mind. I'm perfectly fine with everywhere this can go. There's not a lot of leaps on the other side. I mean, Odin, I guess, can make it through. Serket can make it over a wall. But good walls. Hachiman would get locked in. Morgan could get locked in. I wouldn't mind something like that. And again, maybe something that plays really well into these strings. But also worth mentioning that Horus got a little bit of a buff since it's being hovered. It was the early game healing that was the most significant for it. That is where things are maybe the most unfortunate for you. Like, you've got good prot shred, you've got a stun that comes with you, you've got good, decent knockup. So the peel was always there for Horus, but you're a warrior. No matter what, you're still a warrior. You're going to be lacking a little bit in your own health bar, and that early game healing was okay, but not a lot. So this is a really good buff for him. I'm excited to watch this. This is something I actually expected to see the Leviathans do before anybody else.
I was just kind of looking down for a moment and realizing that Cerberus, who was like one of the hottest picks for such a long time, teams were first pick, first banning him, somehow made it all the way to 9th pick and was also one of the core components of the Oni Warriors drafts in their matchup against the Bolts. So the fact that it made it not only all the way here, but made it into the Solar Scarabs' hands, it might be a bit of an oversight here by the Warriors, but they still have 1 pick available to themselves. Is it going to be a support pick for Neil, or is this Odin or Serket maybe going his way? We'll have to look to find out as they have this final selection. But looking at the draft across, this Horus, you highlighted perfectly well. That early game healing, 20 base power extra at level 1, or 20 base healing, I should say, extra at level 1. 20 health doesn't sound like a lot, but as we saw in the SEC games earlier, 20 health may have just been enough to make or break some of these escapes.
And I think the Cerberus, if I remember, in the Titan set, like, Sot was nuts on this. I mean, there was a point where, like, they were losing the game, and they should not have been able to make a comeback, and Sot got, like, 4 kills in an engagement and really helped turn things around. So this is a good pick for them through and through. I really like what the Scarabs have picked up, but I think that looking at the Warriors, the way that Serket can play, like you had highlighted the Morgan and what the transformations are available, now this Terra being added to the mix, it creates a lot of complications for the Scarabs that in some of these late game team fights, they have to be very cautious about their engage. One person out of position, which is one of the biggest problems the Scarabs have faced all year, that's all it will take for somebody to get just eviscerated, taken out, and then you're in a 4v5.
I mean, we saw it yesterday, it was yesterday that we saw where Stewart was erasing people with a single combo from the Axe. Yes. You get Axe Stun, that's just the name of the game for Ullr. Axe, Bladed Arrow, Hail of Arrow, dead. And maybe a basic attack weaved in between to get a kill. Now you have that plus a Horus who can shred those protections. Yeah. So if they get a stun on one person and those beads are down, that's probably going to be a kill for them, no matter who they're going against, whether it's their support, whether it's their carry, or even the jungler if they make a rotation. But this Terra as a 10 pick, how do you like it to kind of round out the draft for the Warriors?
Look, Terra's always going to be look, Terra has a great ult. That's the only point that's I can make. Terra's ult is really good, and in team fights, it is very helpful. I think that's going to be a problem, again, that they have to overcome. And when you add that with the Cirquet's ability to isolate a target, maybe get some burn damage, or Odin's ability to force a fight, I think it's going to create a lot of problems for them in some late game team fights when everybody's grouped up. Up to that point, though, you have some good clear, you've got some good control. The Terra provides a lot, but maybe not as much strength as we might get to see out of this Horus. Still should be able to do a lot more early on than what I expect to see out of like Inbound on the other side.
One of the things that we didn't get to see at all in the Titan or in the King set because it was banned away, but now that they have the opportunity, we get to talk a little bit about this Bastet coming from Scream, one of the few players in the league who will grab this pick, and the fact that it was respect banned from him in all of their matchups. It's going to be a nuts match to watch, kind of taking a look at this Bastet. But before we hop into the game, we do need to take it to a bit of a brief break as they're getting a remake to make sure that they can get the best lobby possible to maintain that competitive integrity. So we'll be right back right after this break. Hello and welcome back to the desk. We're getting ready to jump into the Solar Scarabs and the Oni Warriors, our first game of the day and our first set of the day, and taking a look down the picks and bans. It's if you're just tuning in for the first time since last week, well, 8.9 hit, and that's why you're seeing a lot of differences amongst the draft, namely an Uller first pick, a Bastet immediately after. Maybe not surprising if you know who's piloting the Bastet, but I'm loving the diversity that we've seen in just these first 3 sets of games so far.
Yeah, it's really created a like eye-opener, I guess. Like, we've seen some bans that have been like picks that you would never normally expect to see. Scotty is, again, the one that's going to stand out to me. Until someone locks it in, that stands out as a ban, and the only person I can think that would be playing it would be Bear as of right now. But the Bastet feels like a screen pick through and through, something that you could expect to see in the past, but now it definitely fits a lot more with the way the items, a lot of the Mace Tree buffs, as well as like Heartseeker buffs. Like, Bastet is damage with more damage, and then a little bit of extra damage on the side, so it's going to bring a big heavy hitter to the table, and with Raijin and Uller behind it, I think this is a good composition for the Scarabs late game. But again, there's a lot of trouble on the other side. Good isolation from being able to cage somebody in if you're Odin, grab somebody if you're Serket with the ult, or from what we've seen, it's more the taunt from the Serket. 2-man taunts have been really big over the last couple of weeks and making things a lot more interesting. Morgan with those transformations creates some problems, and of course Terra being able to stun or wall you off or any other assortment of CC. I don't know. I like the way that the Warriors are going to be able to pilot the fights. I just think that there's a leg up, at least in terms of team fight, for the Scarabs.
I think for me, the one that stands out is, yeah, we're getting all these assassins. Woohoo, assassin meta is back. Yay, yay. I think this makes it big for the Morgan specifically, because the Morgan loves assassins because she gets to be an assassin. So you can get things like double Fear No Evil, or you can go with a double Serket, even a double Odin if you want to, but who cares who's already doing the double Odin. I love seeing these assassins back because it gives the Morgan a little bit more value, even being able to now have a Bastet of your own to try and combat against it. Could be an interesting matchup here for the Warriors mid laner.
And that's why I think the biggest problem the Scarabs have faced over the last few sets is not their god picks. It's, well, I guess it's a little bit related to play. It's their positioning in a lot of these. Go back to the game they lost against the Kings, the very last game. You've got Scream dying up next to the tier 2 of the Kings, and then immediately inbound is a little too far forward, nobody around him around the Fire Giant, and ends up dying. A lot of their problems lately have been mispositioning. If they can get that under control here, then they're going to be just fine. But if they take a single step out of line, all of those picks you just highlighted will feast on them, and it will cause a lot more trouble than it's worth.
And especially with a god like the Morgan, who can just go stealth, and you'll never expect her to pop up behind you. And especially if we're seeing this Polynomicon build that's been so potent with it, between Dumor, the Poly, Spirit Desolation, Chronos Pendant, tons of CDR, but most importantly, tons of power and easy ways to try and one-shot one of those carries of Scream, or if one of these other carries like Stewart or Bronic step out of line, could be disaster for them. But kind of looking down the draft, I mean, so this just screams a Solar Scarabs roster, and this is even, I would say even before this patch, if these gods get locked in, this is one I'm looking at going, yeah, if any team in this league drafts this, I'm immediately calling this would be Solar Scarabs over anybody else.
Yeah, it fits them really well. It's mainly the Bastet that I think really screams Scarabs more than anything else.
Probably so. Let's see how they perform in this first game up against the Oni Warriors. Going to throw it over to Hinduman and Mifflin to bring the action.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys on the desk. We're into game now. Solar Scarabs versus Warriors, and, well, opening weekend of Phase 3 here, Miff, I should say, because I don't really class Week 1. With the meta changes now coming through, I think we're going to see a lot of differences, and I think when you talk about that, you can see them here with assassins back in the jungle.
Man, all those changes to the Mace Tree just really do make it so much easier to go towards that Assassins column. I think it was actually Scream earlier on this week who said, everyone on the Assassin tab is now free game to be played, and that's because Jotun's got a cost reduction, Brawler's Beatstick got some additional power, Crusher, more power, and it just makes it so much easier for these Assassins to start scaling up throughout the early game. Generally, at 8.8, we saw Warriors because of their scaling.
Nice little X out from Stewart there, over in this duel lane so far. With them both being level 2. Neil Mara, world champion under pressure. Jumping in goes Stewart, though, looking for extra damage. And Vote will return the favor and get a beads in that situation. Interesting.
Yeah, Oni Warriors actually coming out very far ahead inside of that one. Stewart now going to have to play very safe within the lane. So the second that Neil Ma is able to heal himself back up, and it should come pretty easily considering he's got 3 health potions in the pocket, Oni Warriors going to be playing with a distinct advantage inside of the long lane. Stewart just a little bit over-aggressive there, trying to finish off that kill.
Well, these two teams head into Phase 3 as well. Multiple roster changes for the Scarabs in Phase 2. Now they've got an identity and now grinding up towards the World Championships run. Meanwhile, the Warriors, they've now got Neil over in Georgia, so able to play a little bit better ping. And I think in fairness to him, Neil has struggled this year because of it. But is it going to still be a problem? It looks like Neil under a lot of pressure. The axe jump in from Stewart. Transforms again, but vote on zoning. Remember, no beads available for Stewart here at all. The Hachiman banner comes down, but it's not enough to prevent him from living. And Neil Mar will survive that too as we approach 2 minutes in. Crazy duo lane action.
Man, what a contentious lane. I thought Neomar was dead to rights once he got his dash stunned out. I believe it was the fracture that catches him out midway. No way he walks out of that, but a couple of archers just alive, able to keep him up inside of that engagement. Stewart tries to weave his autos, but was not quite successful. Bladed arrow also off the mark, and again, the Oni Warriors coming out ahead.
Just looking at Cubo Fred right now, rotating into the enemy jungle, as is Scream towards this left-hand side of the map. It looks like Scream's going to be the one looking for a gank, but there is a ward down to give vision of this as he comes on through. No beads available for vote, remember, so he could be under some pressure. Still gets collapsed on by the kitty cats. The pounce is good, and Scream gets first blood. Cubo Fred was looking for the invade, but now he's going to have to turn his attention to the fight. Great stun out from Dardis, takes out Scream, 1 for 1, but the first blood bounty so far is still on the side of the Scarabs, unless Stewart can get out of danger.
Stewart is able to make his way over the wall, but Purple Buff still going to be under pressure here. Inbound, trying his best to put up a defense, and with the buff to the second ability on the first, should be able to stick around.
And Cuba will get a kill, and Stewart can only watch on out of mana to continue the chase there as well. So 2-1, gold lead still in Scarab's favor because of the first blood, but they lose the purple buff, and they lose 2 kills in that dual lane.
Hindu, I got a question.
What?
Is there it's Wing Gust, right? The first ability from Horus, the second proc where he tosses out that little tornado.
Updraft into Wing Gust,
Updraft into Wing Gust.
Are you trying to check my knowledge?
Well, no, I'm trying to check my own knowledge.
Oh, wait, okay.
Yeah, so that actually received a buff as well recently, so has a little bit of additional power on it throughout the entirety of the game, which is what I was trying to allude to before Inbound got caught out inside of that purple buff.
Well, interesting question. He's only level 3, so we won't know which one he's maxing first. Will it be the updraft or will it be the fracture? Because they both do bring a bit of a different benefit. More damage from the updraft, but the fracture technically increases your damage done by your teammates. You do shred some protections off the target, and it makes it easier for targets to go down, and I think it's always a conversation there of which you need.
Meanwhile, in mid, Dardez gets spotted, trying to rotate back into the tower. Looked like Scream and Veronic were about to dive in. I got a little bit excited as they were hiding around that corner.
I will say, though, for this game, I think there's a lot of pressure here on Cubo Fred and Dardez playing Circuit and Morrigan, respectively, because they're against this Bastet. And they're the two that have struggled this year for the Warriors, outside of Neil, who should have less issues than usual. But Cubo and Dardez on squishier targets. The duo lane, though, just hasn't stopped in action. Beads down for Stewart. Neil still giving chase. Vogue going to zone away inbound for now, and Neil should be able to get this kill. At the tail end, Stewart still trying to live. The walls come through, and there is another kill for the Warriors. The duo lane working out in their favor so far.
And when the Oni Warriors get aggressive in the duo, it's when these buffs are spawning for the Solar Scarabs. Last time around, it was the purple buff invade off a pick. This time, red buff stripped away. The Solar Scarabs are fighting in, but maybe dedicating a little bit too much of their HP trying to defend space when they should be worried about their actual objectives. And now the purple buff going to be invaded yet again. The Oni Warriors are pulling ahead.
Yeah, not a whole lot Bobby can do on this left-hand side here in this duo lane, especially with minions under the tower. So Vote now at level 6. You can see Stewart still at level 4. Lost most of his minion wave, if not the whole minion wave, to the tower there after his death. So he's going to push him further behind. I guess there is some good news for him, though, in the fact that the experience changes have happened in the patch 2. So he's going to have the extra catch-up mechanic of the lowest level in the game. Will get assist extra experience if his support sticks with it.
Yeah, it's a more effective split nowadays. When you're the lowest experience on your team, it's up to 35% effective split, whereas was at 25% beforehand. So that generally should be the support buff. Might have been a jungle buff if this were 8.8. As they were struggling, but now here in 8.9, junglers generally at least maintain level equity with the highest in the opposite side.
Dardez under pressure, blinked on by inbound, updrafted 2, will transform into the kitty cat itself. The Scream versus Scream is going on, and Scream's definitely winning. It's not the Scream you want to win, though. Cubo Fred will get credit for the kill. The poison does spread onto Veronic, but it won't be anything else other than a nice pick in mid, initiated on by the Scarabs.
Yeah, Scream tries to get involved early on, and unfortunately for him, cannot fight against himself. Dardez, great transformation. I believe the pounce to avoid the pounce as well.
Yeah, and that just added the extra damage on, and that's the abuse case of that. And that's one thing I was expecting in this game. Can Dardez on this Morrigan, can Cubo on the Circuit, squishier targets here, handle the Bastet jungle, because she can put out so much damage and be relatively safe doing so.
Yeah, but Bastet's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Sure, you've got the dot damage to deal with the Morgan, so she can't use that stealth if you're the one engaging, but considering you're also pretty squishy on this Bastet, and the Morgan, more often than not inside the late game, as J-Mac alluded to on the desk, is going to be playing that stealth assassin role in your backline, trying to find the one-shot with Soul Gem, Soul Reaver, Polynomicon. I think that Scream is as well going to feel the pressure inside of this matchup, especially considering Dardes seems to have some pretty quick fingers, right? Using Scream's Pounce to avoid Scream's Pounce is pretty impressive stuff.
Well, red buff secured by Scarabs here on the left-hand side, but the purple buff has spawned, and Warriors have brought Cuvo Fred over here too to try and contest this. Bobby doing his best to zone away, but with a man advantage for the Warriors, this should be easy pickings for them on this left-hand side of the map. Meanwhile, Scream, who's hanging around that middle area, is not finding a window to really get any pressure across the map. Instead, they're going to have to settle for the Scorpion on the right-hand side.
Spawning up the Pyromancer should feel pretty good for both of these teams as Greater Scorpions go down on both sides. Now, the Solar Scarabs playing at a slight disadvantage, about 800, maybe closer to 1,000 gold down, has the opportunity to go to whatever objective the Oni Warriors aren't on. I mean, if the Warriors want to maintain pressure on the duo side of the map and try and go for this gold free, sure, it'll put them a little bit further ahead, but the Solar Scarabs can stem the bleeding by trying to take out a Pyromancer early on.
Not really spoke too much about the solo lane so far, but let's be honest with how the meta has been as of late. It's Guardian versus Guardian. This game, though, specific, we do see Odin back in action again. Do we expect to see Warriors Rise again in that solo lane, or is it still going to be a Guardian sort of zone for the time being?
It feels like whatever the flavor of the week for the soul laners are, right? Because we saw King Arthur come back yesterday. He's got a couple of items now, if he does elect to go down that maze tree, that he can utilize. But Void Shield, Ian and Nerf, and 8.8 balance kind of hurts the Warriors a little bit as well. So I am expecting to see Guardians out of the soul lane for the most part. With Vampiric Shroud, as strong as it is right now, it just has great upgrade paths, good stats on the initial. The Guardians really do benefit from that item a ton, and generally you want that inside of the solo.
And funny enough, the Guardian's doing well in the support role too. The Gebs, the Sylvanas is getting picked again a little bit more. We may just see Warriors get retired for a little bit, which is a bit of a change, I would say, considering they just had a heyday in the jungle for a moment or two. Bobby in mid lane, though, gets aggressive against Dardes. His rest of his team aren't even close yet to getting range, and he couldn't even swoop to get a health heal and reposition as his team weren't there. Now the red buff invaded by Warriors too. Gold Fury is on the table here, and the Scarabs are on the back foot without their support player here. The map is just open on this left-hand side for the Warriors to do as they please.
Yeah, we see this from inbound sometimes. When the Solar Scarabs start to fall behind, he goes for these super high-risk proactive plays. That was a Blinken engagement onto Dardes alone, at least able to strip the beads from the Morrigan. But as you said, nobody in range from the Scarabs to follow that one up, and he just pays the iron price, loses his life, loses his purple buff yet again. The Solar Scarabs are losing completely on the macro game.
And one level down for Stuart in that dual lane still. Mid lane though, Dardes gets aggressive against Baronic, but Baronic there to continue the pressure, uses his beads and the drums of war as Dardes goes down. Good little start for Scarabs here. Can they find more? They look towards Neil, who'll dash away to safety. In the sky is Horus, but target options are limited, so I don't think Bobby will find one there. But a return kill from the Scarabs there on Dardes getting aggressive.
Yeah, Dardes took a play out of Inbound's book this time around, goes in completely on his own, is at least, again, able to strip away the beads from the mid laner, this time Baronic losing out on his.
Credit where it's due to Baronic though. Good reaction time on the
so
beads.
Fast.
Very useful use of the ultimate there to turn around the damage and get out as much as you can. I know it's one thing Ryan used to always say. I don't like giving him credit, but he always says if you're a mid laner and you're going to die, at least get your ultimate off, get as much damage out as you can. Baronic did that, and because of it, he lives.
You know what? I'll speak to that point, but there's more nuance than that, Smite fans, all right? In the early game,
listen, we got to keep it simple, okay? We got to keep it simple.
All right, use your ult before you die then.
There you go. Let's just keep it simple, you know? We're talking a Twitch chat here, okay? It's not like, you know.
My goodness.
Calm down. Cuvo Fred in mid takes a bit of damage from those Taiko drums again. Baronic will Thunder Crush away, but Vote was going and finds the deep shot to get a double for himself. Bobby now on the run. The walls clap on his face, and he'll fall down to a banner. It's actually a double kill for Vote there. My apologies. I thought he got the 2 on the tail end of that horsey gallop in. Instead, the Warriors finding 3 picks are going to go straight for the Gold Fury.
Every time the Warriors get proactive, there's something that they want on the map. It's either, all right, let's get involved, find a pick, go to the purple, go to the red. This time it's going to be the Gold Fury and the Solar Scarabs with just Stuart and SOT alive 10 minutes in. Just have to let this one go, man. SOT slow on the rotation. Might have been able to contest his own red buff. That looks like it's going the way of the Warriors as well. And take a peek at that gold lead, Hindu. 3,000 at the 11-minute mark. That's stifling.
It's not too bad. I mean, I don't see it as out of reach just yet because we've seen
close.
so many games come out. Is there an amount for you that's like, this is almost too far now?
So before 15 minutes, if you're around that 3.5K mark, I'm like, okay, this is a little bit too much. We're still able to fight in, but we're kind of hoping for a couple of micro mistakes. If you're upwards of like 5,000, you're like, okay, we can't be the ones getting proactive on the map. We have to extend this game. And that's the point where it's like you can't even really try and do anything on your own right. You're playing a very reactive style, 5,000 down. Anything north of that, you're praying for multiple mistakes from the opposite side. As of right now, the Solar Scarabs do have the ability to continue to fight in. They've just cut that 3.5 down to 2,000, so they could try and go for something a little bit wonky, and that's something that the Scarabs are very apt to do. I mean, we see them go for these Hail Mary Fire Giants, these wild mid-tier 2 dives. I mean, Horus on the enemy side means that you could just transport your entire team wherever you want to. The Solar Scarabs have the ability to get wily in this match.
Speaking of the Scarabs, they do have some power spikes coming through. These Transcendences in the jungle and the Hunter roll are stacking now for the extra damage that they will bring. And on top of that, you've got that Soul Gem in mid lane for Baronic here. When those come through, expect to see them try and make use of them as soon as they can. And I think it's one of the reasons why we saw the Warriors go for that Fury so quick. They hit a couple of power spikes, specifically the Pridwin for Cuvo, that helped to get that fight underway. And that allowed them to really use those windows to their advantage and find the lead they've got.
But to speak to your point, sure, Baronic hits a massive power spike with Soul Gem, but inbound might just be dead in mid.
He is dead in mid, and there's no real escape. He will jump to a minion. Oh, tell a lie. A bit of a mistake. Drop kill there from Warriors. All kind of trusted each other to get the killing blown. In the end, Bobby will escape back to base, but his level deficit is going to continue to grow unless Nika realizes there's a freebie in the mid lane for him. He will go down. Thunder Crash from Baronic is back to safety. Rather than continuing aggression, all 5 members of the Warriors on this left-hand side for the red buff invade. Remember, the Fury is down.
Yeah, no need for the Fury anymore. Red buff will go the way of the Warriors. Purple spawning up very shortly, and I'm not sure that the Solar Scarabs have received either of these buffs since the first rotation. We're 13 minutes in, and the Oni Warriors are essentially playing with just twice as much jungle as the Solar Scarabs at this point. Stewart absolutely suffering, just trying to find farm wherever he can. Vote naturally pulling ahead up to 13, 2-level lead for Neilma out of support, and then across the board generally largely equal, barring Nika, who's found 1 level for himself.
I will say, with how these fights have gone so far, they're not really seeing too much invade out of Scream. As I say that, we do see him now on this right-hand side, trying to strip some of the jungle. Kibo Fred spent a lot of his time on this duo side of the map, and Scream's not found any fruitful results to head there himself. Normally you like to see the jungles at least trying to power farm in those cases and try and take over the other side. Speaking of just that, it looks like Solar Scarabs heard me talking.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about just a moment ago. We gotta do something. We gotta find something on the map. Pyromancer the call this time, but it's taken a long time. Nika's here.
Can the Bird Bomb connect all the wolves? No is the answer. Just a little bit too late from the Warriors on controlling that area. Bit of pressure in mid lane, though, as that tier 1 tower gets looked at. Baronic is back and safe on the tower, though. So Solar Scarabs find a small nugget of hope in that one. 1,400 gold deficit. As Vote on the left-hand side will at least take down this Draugr to continue the advantage for the Warriors.
Yeah, things now starting to get a little bit better for the Solar Scarabs as they find some equilibrium 15 minutes into this game. But the point I was trying to make before Bobby almost got picked in mid was Baronic sure picks up the Soul Gem, nice power spike for him, but it's a distinct power spike with your jungler who goes for the Transcendence inside of that 3rd slot. You need to get that stacked up before you're getting the full benefit of that item, which is why we see Scream taking this slower pace of the game, just trying his best to farm up inside the jungle proper.
Speaking of Scream again, he's got the heavy mace now. Is that going to be a brawl as you expect, Crusher? We see a lot of variations. I think Crusher's something that comes into play because of the dot damage from Bastet anyway. But, you know, at the same time, Brawlers is always useful for anti-heal.
Yeah, I think it is likely going to be the Brawlers for this guy right here. Neilma forced to use the ult early.
And now the pressure's on, but the walls will slow them down a little bit. Will the overinvestment from Scarabs be a problem? But they're losing the red buff at the same time.
It's done.
Across them up from the Oni Warriors. Solo Troll still wants to go in aggressive. And in doing so, his ultimate forces Vote's beads, but now the Warriors can rotate in. Bobby kept check on him though, but not enough onto Nika, who was looking for a bird bomb, won't find it on Scream. Still the chase from Nika on the front lines here. Neilmar and Nika in the fray, but low on health as Cubo dives in. Bit of a forced fight on this left-hand side. I wouldn't be too comfortable if I was the Warriors here continuing.
Well, they're only here to go for one thing, and that's the Oni Fury, as it's going to be respawning very shortly. 5-stack from the Oni Warriors on the left-hand side, and where's Baronic? All the way on the opposite side of the map, trying to pick up a little bit of farm. Having Vote forced back to base could buy the Solar Scarabs a moment here to regroup themselves and try and look for a defense, but Nika hasn't left, and when the Soul Laners are around the Gold Fury, you better believe that's the call.
Yeah, a bit of a problem though, because I see Baronix on that right-hand side now, and if the Warriors recognize that, that is a huge power advantage around this Fury to take a fight. Specifically because you've not got that mage to deal with the taunt, the fear,
You need
or
this guy.
just the damage to kill the Fury.
And instead, now the Oni Warriors with a 5 versus 4 grouping here do have the advantage around the Fury Pit itself, trying to establish a little bit of vision dominance, but have not had the confidence to pull it proper. Now, finally, starting to leash it themselves with the Solar Scarabs. Look at this grouping. There's a lot on the left-hand side.
Really good job from Scarabs, though. When you look at the level differential earlier, a lot of the Scarabs are now caught up, or if not surpassed, their opposition with how this early game went. Bad news is, though, as you were saying, the Fury's still under pressure from the Warriors here.
Slow.
And the Scarabs just can't get in range to do anything about that. They have to surrender it. And now those minion waves will start to be a bit more empowered next time they come through.
That was an active decision from the Solar Scarabs to let that one go. They knew that it was pulled out. The Oni Warriors do it very slowly on the map. I thought maybe we'd see inbound group up with Veronic towards mid and Shrine utilize that ultimate to regroup, but the cooldown was not available to him, and instead they head over to the right-hand side and try and pick up some farm.
Nice axe from Stuart there as Cuvo jumps in with the ambush, just denies the opportunity. And in fairness to Cuvo, didn't waste his beads there. I mean, we call it a waste. He could have got a kill maybe, but at the same time, was it worthwhile with the Fury being down on that side? Answer being no. Pyro's up in about a minute and a half's time here as Baronic now gets his red buff. Still working on what I expect to be a Soul Reaver next for him. I would say Soul Reaver, if in this state of how the meta has been for a while, is probably one of the most important items for a mage to get.
Yeah, Soul Reaver in conjunction with Soul Gem just feels so good. It increases your initial burst. I mean, like almost tenfold, obviously, a little bit of exaggeration there, but that is where you find the majority of your ability to find these picks inside of jungle skirmishes or in the lane. It's that initial bit of burst, and then just by nature of Raijin, you've got plenty of damage to follow it up. Tycho, drums, Thunder Crash, however you elect to play.
Well, attention is on the right-hand side of the map now. Ward coverage in favor of the Warriors around the Fire Giant pit at the moment. Sentry ward down there. However, a couple of deep wards from the Scarabs on that side now give good vision of if the Warriors are going to enter into that area. And with that, it's just going to alleviate some of the pressure for both teams to be like, okay, Pyro's not up yet. It's not a right position at 18 minutes in to look at an FG here. Let's just continue to farm up where we can and wait for a mistake.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by the pacing of the Oni Warriors right now. Sure, it's not the most massive gold lead we've ever seen, but 18.5 minutes of the game, no objectives on the left-hand side. I'd expect a much larger grouping around this Pyromancer just to generate threat and force the Scarabs to group up. If you could take a team fight now, the Oni Warriors incredibly favored, might be able to pick up the Fire Giant on the tail end, but instead it has been a concentrated effort to just rejoin the lanes and go back to farming.
I do question, like, does Warriors have a better late game draft, though, in terms of scaling? I think it does ever so slightly, in my opinion, favor the Warriors of, like, well, if it's drawn out anyway, we've got Morrigan, Surcat, Hachi man on this team. I mean, let's be honest, Hachi versus Ul in the later stages, I'd rather have the Hachi.
Considering how strong Ul's ability build is now, and you can see that kind of reflected inside of the builds between these two hunters, you might just get one shot. Sure, Hachiman has crit available to him, but takes a couple of auto attacks. You got to get a little bit lucky. Whereas Stuart, Axe, Hail of Arrows, Bladed Arrow,
listen,
probably like 80%.
The best hunters in the world are lucky. We all know that. That's
is the truth.
Always based off that role for the most part. So don't be too surprised there. Good little strip away, though, from the Scarabs on that Pyromancer. The bad news is it costs him a tier 1 tower in the mid lane. And it could have looked for that tier 2, I feel, for Vote there, but instead plays it safe and falls back. So Pyro down, but the map opening up further now for the Warriors. They can aggress further into the jungle with all those tier 1 towers removed.
But the Oni Warriors are the ones who have the onus to get aggressive right now. The fact that the Solar Scarabs were able to start the Pyromancer and take it without any opposition coming their way is, again, just very surprising to me. Anytime the Solar Scarabs are able to do something proactively on the map at this point of the game is the Oni Warriors slipping, in my mind. But still, 3,000 or so gold in the lead. The Warriors don't have to feel too poor about it. And as you said, having stripped away some of those tier 1 towers have exposed these tier 2s and, in turn, exposed themselves a win condition.
See Dardis' build here after the Soul Gem. Looks like is that going to be a Magi's Cloak you expect here? I'm trying to work out what he would go in that situation.
Has to be.
Must be Magi's. I'm looking at the CC that we see provided from the Scarab. Sure, Scream, not a ton on this Bastet. Will provide a bit of a route with the kitty cats. But then you're looking at inbound with the updraft, or you're looking at, I guess, Baronic jumping in, or, you know, of course, the Serpents.
Yeah, Stygian Torment would be a great tool to be able to immune out inside of these fights. And Dart is playing the Morgan, wants to get involved on his own, wants to head into the back line. So that additional bit of CC immunity to make sure if you are committing, you at least get out alive is going to be nice for him. And already has a good deal of damage inside of his build. Doom Orb, Spear of the Magus, and Soul Gem. Going to help him out a lot inside of that burst. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see Magi's immediately into a raw pen item, maybe like an Obsidian Shard or a Spear of Desolation, but where are you going to fit Polynomicon into this build? Is he selling the starter? I'm not sure. We'll see how Dardas likes to play this one.
I mean, do you need to go Poly? I think
you don't need to, but it feels great. It feels great.
No, if you can land that auto, too. That's always
They're stunned right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, they should be. Well, 2-9, 21 minutes in the game. Then gold lead is about 2,500 in favor of the Oni Warriors here. And we are just waiting for the next big team fight. Both teams really looking for something. This is a big play if they do make this one, but I think they might have been spotted in the sky. Look at how Neil and Nico just moving across the map here. They see this coming. And I think I'd let him start it a little bit. Cubo's going to come into the pit pretty fast, but look at the damage done. Cubo blinks in, looks at Stuart, axe to the face. Cubo taking a ton of damage, will use his ult to buy some time and jump away to live again. Meanwhile, though, the rest of the Warriors coming through, chased it on from the Scarabs to secure Cubo Fred. And the tail end of the fight, though, SOT does a good job appealing for his team. Stuart, though, still under some pressure, has to fall back. The carries of the Scarabs very low here, and I think the Warriors sense it.
And now the Solar Scarabs grouped up as 5, try and find some defense in the middle of the lane.
Bird bomb down from Nico onto Stuart. That'll take his life. SOT was trying to deal with Vote at the same time. And SOT will at least get a kill on one, but Nika has got a triple kill. And he would love the quadra right now up against SOT. Bobby's going to try and get away, but Nika might be able to find this on his own.
SOT is going to be incredibly tanky, and with no more abilities available, Nika might have to let this one go. We'll see if Bobby is similarly lucky, as immediately the Solar Scarab starting the Fire Giant has it turned on their head, and now it's the Oni Warriors pulling the largest neutral objective.
The chase for Cubo, I'm okay with them, but the afterfact of that, I just don't think it was worth. This is costing him huge now. I like the idea of the FG call. I like the pick on Cubo. Why not reset?
I don't know where they would be able to go, right? I mean, if they retreat into their tower, we saw they were cut off.
Oh, Bobby, though, causing a couple of problems at the tail end of here. Health bar's getting very low for Neil. He should die to this pit. And Bobby's still alive. Warriors will get the FG, but it comes at the cost of Neil Mar. SOT back in the fray. But what can he do against the Vote? Good Aegis from Vote. Avoids all the damage that SOT can provide. And he'll take out Inbound 2 and get the tail end of that damage off onto SOT for a double. 14-5. And 3 members of the Warriors have FG.
Great play from Inbound to strip away Fire Giant from at least one more member of the Oni Warriors. Neilma is going to have to wait 20 seconds to rejoin his team on the battleground, but a little bit of a look back. Nika having some fun. Triple kill.
Look at the group in there, though. They're all like, okay, protect the back. And Nika's like, wait a second. 4 targets? Yes, please. I love that stuff. Bird bombs in and then looks at Veronica, who, in fairness, Neilmar did a lot of setup there just to support that and peel away. Nika gets himself a triple because of the support of his team. And I think that all comes down to that Cubo chase, really. They invested 3 that side, and the carries were too low to deal with it.
Yeah, once the Solar Scarabs had essentially put themselves in what used to be the Oni Warriors Tier 1 Soul Lane Tower, they were so deep and out of position that it was very easy for the Warriors to go ahead and collapse back in and take the fight afterward. Now the Solar Scarabs don't really get to get antsy on the map. They don't get to go for these wily Fire Giant or Pyromancer plays. Instead, have to play the defense. True 5-on-5 engagement, and their defense is okay. I mean, you're losing out on a lot of your great resources. You're not really using the Horus ultimate to catch you off guard in a defense situation. Scream doesn't really get to find these gank situations where anyone's isolated. Instead, though, you do have great AoE CC from SOT, Baronic, great artillery damage from a range, and well, I've been talking about it all game. We haven't had many opportunities to see it, but Stuart has one-shot potential with this build.
I think the hardest thing is for the carries of the Scarabs to get to that minion wave to clear it. You know, you're standing there banging the drums as Raijin. Sure, he's a great in the meta, but if you step up against the likes of a Circa, a Morrigan, and an Odin, could be spelled disaster. Same could be said for Ul. He wants to get an ability or 2 off, but can he get in range?
It'd be easier said than done, right? Especially considering how strong the engage is from the Oni Warriors. You already brought up the damage output, but the CC lockdown as well. Nika, if you're stepping up, makes it very easy for him to find a cage. Leap away, he'll chase you down. You beat it with Blink or his own leap, and then drop the Ring of Spears. Even Vote with a massive slowing ultimate from the Cavalry Charge can just do whatever he wants, and potentially even 2 of them if Dardas transforms in.
So who stood out for you for the Warriors so far in this set? Because obviously they're the ones winning, but who's been the linchpin of this team?
I've been really impressed by Nika's rotations. I mean, he has controlled that left-hand side of the map. It felt like the Oni Warriors very early on said, okay, purple buff, red buff, I don't care which side of the map it's spawning on, it belongs to us. And Nika was there almost every single time, making sure that they had the numbers advantage inside of these fights. But me praising Nika is nothing new, right?
Say, I mean,
everyone does that.
At 15 minutes in, sure, you can give him the praise for those rotations, but I mean, for my liking, I'd say Neil and Kivo, who've been under a lot of fire about their players of late too, they both look very good so far today, but hopefully I don't curse them. Nika blinking in, gets Stuart trapped in the ring, he'll leap away. Phoenix being tanked still by Nika as SOT tried to get to the front line there. Took a lot of poke in doing so. Warriors reset and now go again with a stun on SOT. Full commit onto SOT seems to be the plan here as the circuit ultimate used. Bobby up downs to give themselves a shield, but the Phoenix falls. The front line peeled away by the Warriors, and that opened up that Phoenix.
It was a little bit expensive for the Oni Warriors with the HP bars. I wouldn't think so just looking at them. It felt like the Solar Scarabs at no point were able to land some damage into the backline. Scream pops his ultimate. That's a huge bit of DPS loss. Inbound loses his as well. And now the Solar Scarabs in a position where they have to defend yet again. The Oni Warriors, though, happy with just stripping away that left side. Phoenix, go ahead, go for the Greater Scorpion and the Pyro.
Well, Scarabs should have learned something then, is that Warriors aren't scared of taking out the front line first. They will take out SOT, and that could be a nice little sign for the Scarabs backliners here to go, hey, if they're going to go on the front line, we can step up a little bit more here and maybe return some of that fire that's coming out on these Phoenix engages. I mean, the worst thing is it's left-hand Phoenix, which is one of the hardest ones to defend.
Yeah, now the Solar Scarabs got to contend with fire mini waves on the opposite side of the map once the Fire Giant spawns up proper, but Silver Linings where they lie, at least able to pick up the Draugr. So if we see the Oni Warriors group up on that tier 2 on right, trying to establish some pressure pre-Fire Giant, they're going to have to work a little bit harder to take this one out. Now does a little bit more damage and takes a little bit less from the opposition. I don't expect really to see the Solar Scarab step up to the Fire Giant proper. It's so hard to put up a defense in a position like this, especially considering 10,000 gold behind. You're losing on the left side, Phoenix. You only got one tier 2 tower to retreat towards, so that doesn't feel very safe either. Instead, I think that the one silver lining for the Scarabs really is it took a very long time for the Oni Warriors to take out that Phoenix. It was a very expensive engagement. Cuvo, Fred, and Neilma use their ultimates onto SOT. Nika engages the fight initially with the Ring of Spears, and no kills for the Warriors. The Phoenix still lived for about 20 seconds. So the Solar Scarabs, if they play their cards right, might be able to put up another defense.
FG spawns now. Bobby jumps over the wall and is spotted immediately by the ward coverage from the Warriors. Even sentry wards around where the Scorpion spawns in the jungle here just to keep this vision going. Frontliners of the Scarabs going on in as Vote and Neil start the FG for a second, but focus is back to the carries again. SOT forced to leap away as Scream was trying to get towards that circuit of Cuvo Freds, but he won't find it this time round.
Nika just doing his best to create a little bit of space for the rest of the team. And good eyes, Doug. That Solar Scarab's left side. Phoenix, being down, is going to have some minions flooding their way in.
It'll take 3 minion waves, though, total to really take down the Titan on its own. I don't think it's going to be enough on its own, but it will maybe force someone back to base or a tail end of a fight. Nika, though, blinking in again.
Great ult.
Drops the ultimate down. Stuart leaps out and dumps on again. Baronic joining him, though, and Nika still providing the pressure with Neil Mar as Darnez gets the kill. I said it was Neil Mar. It's not. It's Darnez as the terror there as Vogue goes down in the back to Scream, but Cuba will make him pay for a 1-for-1. However, with Baronic already being dead, a lot of the damage used from Scarabs on the back foot. As Warriors only lose Vote, it would slow down their FG siege, but it might not slow them down looking for towers.
No, that tier 2 tower is going to fall down pretty quickly, and there's that Fire Minion Wave peppering some damage into the Titan proper. Scream legitimately took a 1 versus 3 up against the Oni Warriors inside of the jungle, and it didn't matter for the rest of his team. Baronic still struggles, but he's at least able to find 1 kill on a Vote, and that is high value.
That's warranted. Like, if you can kill the AD carry at this stage of the game, the one with crit, first of all, the one that puts out most of the damage on the Phoenixes onto the FG as well. I mean, let's be honest, Morrigan's not the greatest at clearing a Fire Giant on her own with damage. You are going to need some support there. And speaking of Morrigan some more, no Polynomicon in this build. You were right with the Obsidian Shard, so he has gone for the extra pen. And he's upgraded that starter item as well, so we won't be seeing the Polynomicon this time around.
Man, Vote's build is so unique, isn't it? Crusher, Aussie, Wind Demon, dominance into the Odysseus's bow. Actually sold his first item to transfer it into the Crusher, and then the Bumba's Spear to notch it all up. This is a lot of auto attack damage. You don't have a lot of crit percentage, but Wind Demon having that 10% penetration on it on its own means that it's a pretty decent fit inside of this build. Tanks are actually legitimately getting shredded by Vote at this point, and if he's lucky, a little bit of crit to back him up.
Well, he does have Spectral on the side of the Scarabs here, so they are trying to answer back a little bit of that crit that's in that build there for sure. But as you said, it's the penetration, just consistent barrage of arrows coming through. Warriors, though, back to the FG once again. Left-hand Phoenix has respawned, but there is another Fire Minion Wave heading down that lane that may get there if this fight continues too long. SOT takes a ton of damage from the walls again, coming out from Neil Mar for the setup of damage. As Warriors just dance the dance for the time being. They're waiting for Scarabs to overextend, and the pings on the left-hand side of the map show you a lot of attention is on that Fire Minion Wave that is still heading for the Phoenix.
Nika again trying to generate space, but the Oni Warriors are not willing to commit to the Fire Giant, Enhanced Fire Giant by the way, as we have passed that 30-minute mark. So whichever team is able to pick this one up, do not have to worry about backdoor protections, but keep your eyes on Scream. The second he shows himself on this left-hand wave should spell the go factor for Oni Warriors.
And he has to go there to deal with that fire minion wave, otherwise they lose the Phoenix. And you are completely right. SOT under even more pressure now. Bobby trying to zone away. Stewart gets ringed in and leaps to safety. Veronic now under pressure, surrounded by 5 members of the Oni Warriors. Scream still trying to get back to this fray, but the damage has been done. Bobby will escape, but he'll lose half his health and his ultimate in doing so. And the Warriors, after taking Veronic's life and a couple of relics like bees off of Stewart, can fall back to the FG.
Scream, though, is now rejoining the fight with all of his resources available to him, and Dardes, already at half HP, might be a pretty juicy target for this Bastet.
Big fight this one for Scream. If they can steal this FG, they've got a window to get back in this game. It's not done just yet. But the damage he just did to Scream was... Sorry, so Dardes was huge, the pounce was good, and the declaw was better. But will he be punished now by Mika? Will the cancel buy him a moment? The mystical mail is tick, 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 boom in. Now he's going to look towards Stewart, the rest of his team dealing with the carries in the back line, or should I say the front liners, who can't do a ton against them. Kubo still looking at Stewart though, who has no bees, thrown back into the fray of the Oni Warriors. Stewart though buys time with his Aegis. Not enough though for Vote to clean up his kill, and now Bobby's next on the list, and soon after should be SOT.
SOT finds a nice Stygian Torment, only to extend his own life by a couple of seconds. Vote credit for the double pill, but I have to highlight it. We saw Scream jump the first ability from Dardes out of stealth. He didn't listen for the activation. He just knew it was coming, avoids that damage, and finds the kill. At the end of the day, though, micro plays like that might not be enough to net you a win.
Health bars are kind of low on the Warriors here. They don't have the FG. They only have a normal minion
15
wave.
seconds.
But Ronick does have his relics alive. There is a small window for him here. The drum's popped. He's focusing on the carries, mainly Vote, but Vote will use his ultimate to avoid and immune some of that damage and also prevent the CC. Oni Warriors will take this 1-0 so far, up against the Scarabs.
The Oni Warriors, that was convincing for me. I mean, I know there's been a lot of hype around the Solar Scarabs recently. These guys have looked incredibly good, as you said at the beginning of this one. Seems like they've really identified what they want their style to be inside of the match. But the same can be said of the Oni Warriors, right? We have seen them a little bit less so far in this phase, but that was a convincing look for me, man. That was a dominant performance. It felt like at no point the Solar Scarabs were allowed to play their own game.
I think we've had the first 2 phases go too, looking at these 2 teams specifically. It's very interesting to see how these 2 play, because I think they're very even at the moment with how they've played through the first 2 phases. They've got the Scarabs, they're kind of learning to play as a team once again, and you got the Warriors that are trying to deal with the ping, but also deal with the fact that they should be a top team.
Yeah, I think so. The Oni Warriors were hailed as like one of the super teams coming into this one. These have, it's a ton of players, individual talent, a great shot caller from Neilma, and we have not seen them live up to that performance as of yet. If we keep getting this form of the Oni Warriors, though, I think they've lived up to it.
Well, we'll see what Warriors or Scarabs can do in the next game. We're going to take a quick break while those guys get ready.
Welcome back to the desk. The Oni Warriors able to pick up a win in game number 1, but one thing that you can pick up yourself is some new athletic joggers or a new mouse pad. They're available at our Insight Apparel store. You can go to shop.smiteproleague.com and get any of the new team athletic joggers available. We've got all the different team logos across the board available for you to pick up. So whatever team you want to represent, they got a jogger for it, and they have a custom mouse pad to boot. This is the one for the Oni Warriors, and we're going to see one for the Solar Scarabs. We saw it yesterday, and it still looks really good. It might be my. It's hard to say if that's my favorite one so far that we've seen or if that's my second favorite, because the Dragons one looked really good.
How irresponsible is it to buy 8 mouse pads? Like, I know I don't need 8 mouse pads, but I really like the designs on all
You
the
know
mouse
what?
pads.
I should go in between the breaks to shop.smiteproleague.com
money
and
for
look
8
up
mouse
to see
pads.
how much one of those mouse pads are and tell you how irresponsible it may or may not be.
No,
I'm
it doesn't, look, if it's anything more than
Like
like
$5
$5 each, and I can guarantee they have to be. They look too good to not.
Exactly.
I can't buy 8 of them, J-Mac.
But you can buy one at least.
Yeah, but then how do I choose?
So you go to like random.org and then you do 1 through 8 on the number.
But
and
what
you
if
just
I
roll
want
it
another
down.
one too?
Then you can buy another one. I'm sure they'll be around for a little bit. Or why don't you buy a mouse pad for your favorite, and then you can buy a pair of joggers to represent
Dude,
another
actually,
team.
I do need some joggers. Hold on, wait a minute.
So there you go. If you need athletic joggers or mouse pad, shop.smiteproleague.com. We got off for a while. Let's dial it right back here. Game number 1, Oni Warriors and Solar Scarabs. Oni Warriors looked really strong. Game number 1, able to get to an early lead against the Scarabs. But for the longest time, Gore, for the first, 16 to 20 minutes, it never really amounted more than like a 2,000 gold lead. But then the Oni Warriors are finally able to find some big picks and start to escalate that lead.
Yeah, this was a game where if the Warriors didn't get off to such a solid start, I think there's a lot more back and forth in the late game. You saw a lot of good fight from the Scarabs, but these early game kills, specifically from Cubo, transitioned into what was maybe some of the best. Like, I had flashbacks. I don't know if you remember this. It was a game against the Kings that the Warriors had played where Nika gets this Odin solo, and at the time, it was kind of a hard carry. It was just the solo carry from Nika. This was a lot more team-focused, but it had a lot of reminiscent moments of that, where it's just Nika, especially in that moment, getting a triple kill and causing so much trouble. That transitioned really well. Nika plus Vote. A little bit of Cubo still, although he carried a lot of the early game. Vote picked up a lot of the slack late game. It just transitioned too well for the Warriors, and the Scarabs had a little more fight later on in the game. But they were down by so much at that point that it didn't matter as much. They weren't going in on equal footing. Even when you got a single pick, it felt like the Warriors were ready for it and retaliated in kind.
A lot of that early game from the Warriors focused towards mid. That's where we saw the first 3 deaths of the game happen, was right there in that mid 2v2. And then from there, it kind of transitioned over towards the side lanes a little bit more. Much later in the game is where Nico was finally able to find some big picks, as we saw the highlight for the triple kill by him over towards that Fire Giant. Vote was able to start making rotations over. And Vote, I just got to take a look down here. 28,000 player damage compared to everybody else, almost double the player damage of anybody else in the map. Vote kind of put some work out there, and deservingly so. 7 kills to his name to end the game.
Yeah, pretty much double every single one of the Scarabs. I think the biggest one that stood out to me was Baronic's damage was only about 400 damage more than what we got to see out of Neil Ma on the other side, and that speaks more wonders than anything. The fact that the Raijin wasn't able to get impactful. There were a couple of moments, there was one that stood out in my mind. They still got the kill, but the Taiko drum was like just shy of killing Cuvo Fred on a retreat, that it forced them to re-engage and kind of put them in a bad position. It's little moments like that really ate the Scarabs alive, and again, a lot of it came from good early picks from the Warriors. I think that you have to change your early game strategy entirely right now if you're the Scarabs, because that did not land where you needed it to.
Yeah, the early game was a little bit of a struggle for them. Let's see if they change things up for game number 2. Picks and bans ready to go. We'll see if things are able to change out amongst these two teams. See if we make any adaptations. The Bastet, look, the Bastet, it's a signature Scream, but he wasn't able to quite put out the numbers that maybe the Scarabs looking for in game 1. Game 2, do you maybe see him make a transition away from that god?
They might pick it up again, but I think they'd want to shove it down in the picks and bans. It's one of those things, like, if they ban it in their second phase, you're still going to have plenty of assassins that I think are good for Scream. Whereas if you had grabbed, Geb, Sylvanas in that position, they picked it number 2, right? Even you're like a Cirquette over the Bastet, Terra, any of these other like really prominent supports or guardians or someone that could maybe fit up there that isn't going to be as, or I guess is going to be more contested than something like the best Bastet, which Scream's the only one who plays, I think could have benefited them a little bit more. It also has to open it up because we saw I liked the Horus pick. I didn't necessarily like the Horus performance. It didn't really land where it needed to every step of the way. I mean, there were a lot of good moments from inbound, but definitely not as many as we've come to expect, or at least as you have to expect, especially if the Warriors are going to look like that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe grab a support for inbound earlier, but also maybe even ban out the Odin, try and control Nika a little more.
Could be a good idea to maybe ban that Odin away. I believe Nika was one of the powerhouses. Maybe not the one who brought the Odin back in the meta, but definitely showed what a hard carry that god could be. So there'll be a response from the Scarabs. They'll take that and the R2 away. The Oni Warriors will ban Hell. A wise ban. Nobody really wants to play as Hell, play against Hell, be anywhere near Hell. Maybe unless you have it on your team, then you're fine having that Hell. But they'll ban it away along with the Morgan, which is interesting because Dardus picked up in that game, did really well with it. But we saw what Baronic was able to do with it previously when coupled with the Tsukuyomi, so a bit of a wise ban here, not wanting to first pick that. They don't think that that is the option. They want to go for their first pick, so they'll ban it away knowing that the Solar Scarabs might take that in their top 2, and instead they'll leave open the Umoja after the Cerberus and Serket bans.
And honestly, the Cerberus is the one that stands out the most to me because I felt like that was potentially going to be a first pick. I think you had mentioned it, not just something that has been incredibly powerful, but something that is great specifically for Nika, and I think it would have been able to fall right in line with what they were wanting. And it is a little weird, though. Like, you jumping back onto the Morgan, it's not been played a whole lot by Baronic. And so that's it stands out to me as one that you probably could have gotten away with banning something else. But at the same time, I don't think you need to worry too much about it. I only have one game of his, one game that he's actually played it. Was banned against them, though. And so something that was maybe a little more worrisome, banned each game by the Kings every time they played it. So still something, I guess, worth worrying about. But maybe not as much as I would have worried about some of the other picks. Although the Raijin, admittedly, who I think is one of the most powerful to have over there, didn't seem to do much, so I guess they don't mind it if they can handle it.
Be Terra and Tsukuyomi on the other side of the map for the Solar Scarabs. Picking up that Tsukuyomi very early. Scream had a strong performance on it in the second game against the Titans. That was coupled with the Morgan, so they get that double piercing moonlight, maybe focus out 2 different targets, or just burst kill a single target, but now coupling that with the Terra. Catch anybody inside that Terra ultimate, and you hit them with that piercing moonlight, you can instantly try and break out the ultimate damage from Terra, try and get some burst healing for yourself. But Solar Scarabs with their top 2 now leaves the Oni Warriors. We saw Vote go for a Hachiman after quite a few things got banned away from him in the second round. Do you maybe think he picked something up a little early here, or do you think he's fine just grabbing whatever's open?
I mean, this wouldn't be a bad spot if you want to go for the Rom,
The Room.
or the Ul. If you try to put 2 together, you end up with really, really weird names. But yeah, like Rom, Uller, all really, really like prominent. I completely forgot Tiamat existed in the game because she's been glanced over. Admittedly, she hadn't been doing too hot lately either, so not the end of the world to forget about her. The Raven catches me off guard just a little bit, but it is a Cuvo pick, so even though it's not maybe something that I expect heavily right now, it's something that he plays really well, and this is a meta that, especially if he can play like he did last game, I'm not going to complain anywhere near it. But I will say this Terra Tsukuyomi was the exact same starter 2 that the Scarabs had against the Kings yesterday, at least in the game that they won. And so I do think that gives them a little bit of prominence. Those 2 picks are very powerful for him.
Stewart going with the Rom for his selection of Hunters. So you're talking about it maybe for Vote, but instead it'll be the Raven and Tiamat, putting a lot of priority towards their own. We saw a few Raven bans previously, and I was kind of shaking, kind of scratching my head, shaking and going, Raven. Not really a pick I would think he'd be coming back, but then again, it is an assassin, and some of his core has been buffed. I know that Crusher is also an item that some Ravens would go. It gives you a little bit of best of both worlds. You get some high ability damage, you get some basic attack speed, and get a little bit of extra bang for your buck. But as far as the bans go, if the Oni Warriors, they ban out Baronic's Giannis, and they take away the Sylvanas. Sylvanas, it's a fun one to throw together. They take that one away from Bobby, and then on the other side of the map, it's going to be an Izanami and a Heimdall banned away by the Solar Scarabs, and they'll pick up the Solar Scarab in Kepri as their 4th pick.
And I really am liking their draft. Terra's great for team fights, and we've seen what Sot can do on that pick when it's over in the solo lane. Rom is just good. There you go, blanket statement, pretty easy. If you hit his ult, which I expect a lot of, it's going to be a great fight ender or starter or even in-betweener. As long as you are able to get a kill, I think it is going to be helpful. And even if you don't get a kill, sometimes it's incredibly helpful. The Tsukuyomi we saw yesterday looked incredible for the Scarabs as well. And you get the Khepri play, which I think the Khepri brings it all together, something that actually kind of opens my eyes to realize there's so many different Guardians right now for supports that are viable and feel good, that I think it's definitely making things a little more interesting.
Yeah, Guardians are cool and everything, but Amaterasu, we didn't see her at all Phase 1, at all Phase 2, except for the one less than serious matchup between the Dragons and the Titans, I believe, and I think it was...
it happened, though.
It did happen. I think it was Cyclone Spin, if I'm not mistaken, who picked that up and was able to pilot up against the Osiris that he was going against. But now seeing it here, for the first, we'll kind of call it the first legitimate...
My brain purged that game, and the fact that I remember Panda Cat playing Osiris versus Cyclone's Ama really upsets me. I liked that it was locked away, J-Mac. It was gone.
I opened
up back.
Look, I opened up that can of worms. Now we have to deal with the repercussions of it, but it's going to be an Amaterasu and a Hachiman one more time for Vo. We saw what he did last game, 26,000+ player damage on this god. Now on the other side, the Solar Scarabs for their 10th and their 5th selection, and for the 10th and final selection of the draft, will be a Merlin to round things out.
And I actually like this. Looking at the other team, Yamoja, Tiamat, Ama, all going to be a little tankier. Raven as well is, as an assassin, slightly tankier than some of the others that you would imagine. He's also safe. Merlin does a good job of burning down a lot of these targets, and he's mostly safe. It does bring in some questions. Neither of these teams have this loud, screaming objective control, except for that River's Rebuke to me means that's going to be something the Warriors might be able to isolate and capitalize on. They'd still have to be worried about snipes, those can go over walls and things like that. But I do think that they have a little bit of an edge up there. This Merlin, however, I think helps balance out a lot of these team fights. If the damage is going to be good, again, can stay relatively safe, at least enough to get a lot out. And it makes things, especially when you look at Ama's healing, Yamoja healing, Tiamat just being Tiamat, it does allow easy Divine Ruin application throughout the entire team.
And we have been seeing a lot of, this more lifesteal-centric sometimes with this Tiamat. There's a lot of flexibility with what Tiamat's build. Sometimes you go for just a bunch of cooldown, you get a little bit of lifesteal in there, and then some of that pen. Sometimes we just see the hard pen build coming through, and we've seen occasionally just some pure lifesteal builds. You get 2-3 lifesteal items online, and it just feels like you can never out-damage the sustain that god has, especially when multiple gods are diving on you. When you look at the performance Nika had with the Odin, now you're looking at this Amaterasu that's most likely going his way. I don't see this Yamoja ever getting out of the support role. Sorry for anybody who may have liked the Yamoja solo potential. I don't see it being there. How do you kind of like this change up for Nika on this god?
Honestly, this was one of Nika's most winning gods last year. That as its own should be enough to control it. I mean, there was a point where he had a 100% win streak on it. I think at the end of the day, it probably ended in the high 90s, maybe the low 90s. I mean, he had such ridiculous amounts of control on this pick that I don't think that it's something to glance over at all. Going up against the Terra, maybe nothing big happens in lane, but when you get to the same point where he was getting quadra kills as the Odin last time around, I think you're going to be seeing insane dazzling offensive, really good stuns, too much control coming from the Amaterasu for the Warriors.
Yeah, the Amaterasu is something we don't get to see very often. In fact, we haven't seen it at all this year except for one game, which we will not speak of any further beyond there. But a lot of control for this team, but a lot of control on the opposite side of the board as well. Khepri, Terra, going to be able to pick either a single person off, whether you go with the stun from the walls with Terra or the pluck with Khepri. You have some AoE control with that monolith, and you have things like the Tsukuyomi to go for those big single target picks. Gore, before we jump into game, one quick word. Do you think we see game 3, yes or no?
I don't know. The Warriors got a really good draft.
Well, let's see if they can make it happen for the Solar Scarabs. Can it take us to game 3, or the Odin Warriors going to run away? We'll take it to the casters to find out.
Thanks so much, J-Mac. Yep, me and, of course, the King of the Zoomers, Mifflin, joining me once again.
King of the Zoomers.
I mean, that's
Is that my official job title?
It's the only thing I could say you're good at. Yeah.
But, so, like, official job title?
No.
I can have King in my title?
No.
I'm going to put it in my Twitter bio.
No.
King Mifflin. You got it. You heard it here first. Hindu Man said it.
King of the Zoomers in a negative sense, not in a
Yeah,
positive
but of the
sense.
Zoomers is in parentheses.
No. Because we've already got kings in game. We've already got the Camelot Kings. You can't have more than that. And you've also got Arthur. You can't be a third king, dude.
Well, I so can.
Then you're just like getting a bit weird.
You're from the UK. There's like 100 kings.
They have to die first. The kings aren't dead.
Okay.
King Arthur's not dead,
Well,
right? He's in
not
game.
yet.
Right? You can't have that happen. All right, back into the game we go, though. Only Warriors up 1-0 so far up against the Solar Scarabs. And look at the drafts. I do kind of agree with what Gore was saying on the desk. I'm kind of favouring Warriors on paper with how game 1 went. And looking at game 2, it's almost a bit trickier, I feel, this time for Scream to get to that back line because the target is going to go on her even more mobile.
They are more mobile, but he's got one of the best engage tools as far as Assassins goes. Piercing Moonlight, you just kind of press 4, you point it at whoever you want, and you're going to get there. At least one proc is all you need to teleport to your opposition. That said, I love playing Devil's Advocate, but I'm not necessarily doing it just for the sake of it right now. I really like the Solar Scarabs draft. I think they got great engage, they've got great survivability, they're scaling, all incredibly strong.
Still got aggressive this duel, and there's a frenzy was just popped by Bobby after the ability usage, and now they're trying to just get wave pressure more than anything else. Stewart and Inbound will control the lane for the time being. Not real surprising, because I do think Kepri's damage output in the early game is a little bit underrated that most people won't realize because of just how much those dot damage do, as we check in with Nika dealing with SOT's Terror in this solo lane. I know we were talking on the desk about Amaterasu not seen too much of her, but her early game did get some buffs recently.
Wow.
And that's exactly what you can do. Nika with a solo kill on Solo Island.
Yeah, back in Season 7, this was one of Nika's premier picks. I believe there was 9 games in a row where he locked in the Amaterasu and won every single one of those 9 games. In a post-game interview said, look, man, I don't even really like this god, but she's kind of really strong, so I play it. Maybe we're seeing shades of that here in Season 8.
I know you say that, but I feel like every pro says that about every god. I don't really like playing this god, but I'll play it because it does well, you know? And that's kind of what they should do, because they're pros and they're playing a competitive game, right?
Yeah, no, they're right to do it. There are a couple people who are like, I'm going to play what I want. Scream, for example, locking in Bastet. I don't think anyone else on the planet is saying, yeah, Bastet just wins games. I think Scream legitimately just likes that pick.
But he, for the most part, has a very good game.
Yeah, he does well.
For the most part, and he really makes the best of that god, and playing the god a lot will show that. I just wish that, you know, the multiple star gods I see in my games would play that well.
The multiple star Bastets in your casuals aren't doing good enough for you?
Not just the Bastets, dude. It's not even multiple. Vote under pressure here. Needs the beads to escape and does so against the Abduct from the follow-up damage. Neil did a good job returning some fire there to slow down and stem the bleeding. But you can see there's a bit of a battle of attrition in this duo lane so far. Both purples are available. And nobody really dead just yet, but those beads now being down for vote could be a sign for Scream to maybe look to pay a visit soon.
Legitimately a market improvement here for the Solar Scares, being able to, maybe I'm counting my chickens before they hatch, but get their second purple buff as they start to pull it now, but a little bit of opposition rolling their way. Neilma not going to make it easy.
I will say some of that, though, is based off the jungler picks this game, too, as Abduct used on Neilma, purple buff secured by Stewart there on the tail end. And he should be able to walk away with it. Tell a lie, looks like it wasn't. Kivo in mid, though, up against Scream here, who is now level 5 on that Tsukiyomi. We'll see what impact he can make on this game as it continues. But I do think one of the reasons the purple buff hasn't been looked at as early as it was, or the focus on invading so far from the junglers, really is the style of junglers they've both gone for.
Yeah, a little bit of a slower start. Maybe the Robin could get involved a little bit earlier on, considering he just is incredibly strong. But Scream, well, he's doing a little bit stronger.
Nice overhead kick to immune all that damage coming through from Scream, and Cuba will get back to his tier 2 tower in the mid lane, but it does open up a jungle pathing here for the Scarabs to invade. Back Harpy's taken away, red buff unfortunately down for about another minute there. But at least, you know, he'll take that green buff, which is probably the most useless amount of experience I've ever seen outside of like a small baby Harpy.
What? You really are a support. You're out here.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Your first cast here in Season 8, you're already vying for some support buffs, man.
Don't start that. Season 8, I was casting in Phase 1, Phase 2.
I'll go Phase 3. I should say Phase 3. You're right.
Yeah, Week 2 of Phase 3.
Week 2 of Phase 3.
Week 3 of Phase 2. Yeah.
Week 3 of Phase 2.
Phase 3 of Week 2. That's the one.
Where are we? What week is
what
this?
Year? I've got dementia after all these years. I've just seen so many Smite games that just bleed together at this point.
Well, you've written it so far ahead in the
green
script,
buff
right?
experience sucks. That's all I'm trying to say, okay?
Fair enough. You know what? I agree. It feels like almost a waste of time as me, the jungler, to go over towards it.
Don't take it. Leave it for the support.
Well, yeah, but then you guys are complaining like, oh, I can't clear it out on my own.
We can't?
Well, you can. Some of you.
It just takes a while.
Yeah, I don't think
And
Emoja's doing it very quick.
When you frickin' junglers go and do it anyway, you don't even do it when I can get it. You're like, oh, right, he's at a tier 1 tower.
Well, it's not like you really even want that buff, right? How often are you picking up green and you're like, all right, well, now the purple buff can't expire.
It's not to do with the buff being good. It's just to do with the fact it's nice to have a buff for a change, okay? Like, it's not
So
normal.
go invade a purple. Go wear the secondary purple buff.
Okay, that's a good call. Good call.
There it is.
So we just got to invade to get our buff. That's the rule as a support again. Once we start doing speed buff invades at level 1 again, I'm down, okay?
God, Invader's Curse, man. You know what? I wouldn't mind if that goes away.
Look at that level discrepancy in the dual lane developing, though. Level 6 now for the Oni Warriors in this dual lane. Bobby just hit level 4 there as well. Sorry, level 5 there to make sure he's got an ultimate available. I would like to see the Scarabs start to put some pressure on using this ultimate from Khepri specifically. And there's a lot of plays where you can dive a little bit deeper than expected, knowing that you do have the revivability of a Khepri on your team.
Yeah, in particular, maybe the Piercing Moonlight to dive deep on your own and then just utilize that Scarab's Blessing as a safety net to work yourself out of those situations. Or even SOT, once he starts to rotate, can dive a little bit further, but maybe not the case, as he is an entire level down on Nika, who was able to pick up First Blood a couple of moments ago. The Oni Warriors, though, I would say, take a much slower pace here in Game 2. They're not going for concentrated invades on the purple and red, even though I think they could be capable of doing so. I know you said the junglers maybe a little bit slower, but Robin, I would consider a little bit faster.
I agree. You should be the one being a bit more proactive in the early stages, right? And you're looking for the Tsukiyama to be a little bit more counter-reactive to an extent of what's going on. I will say, in the solo lane, though, Nika going for that Kasari first of all. I think he's a little bit underrated with how useful that's going to be in specifically the lane matchup, but also for the rest of his team as this game develops.
And legitimately, just an incredibly strong stat stick.
True.
I mean, just about every single stat you want is going to be stacked up on Shogun's Kansari, so Nika now going to be very hard to shut down, but still not lacking in the damage department, as he does have the Mannequin Scepter. And taking a peek at the Totemaku control, I was expecting to see Nika have a little bit more, but it's actually 2-3 favored the Scarabs.
Talking a bit more builds as well, though. Vote, meanwhile, going for the Crusher beginning here this game. Meanwhile, his opposition, Stuart, playing that Rama. Transcendence on the Rama. We've seen it now and again. We don't see it too often. But with these buffs towards that item, the power is very useful for the Snipe Barrage that can come into play as the game goes on.
Yeah, just an additional 10 power added onto that item wholesale, and then once you get it stacked up, feels pretty good, and some additional CDR to have that Astral Barrage available almost always, as now the Oni Warriors are going for that same style, invading the purple.
Riptide gets hit, and Bobby just trying to juke this out because he don't think he can slip through because of where the Riptide placement was, and that could cost him his life. Ultimate used, and the crushing wave will cause him a problem. Can they still pick up the kill at the end? It will go to Neil, but the overextension could be punished.
Scream now with the rotation as the Piercing Moonlight onto 3, and the damage is ringing true.
And Cubo Fred goes down to Stuart, but return kill from Dardes on Scream as the rotation returns from Warriors. It's a 1-for-1, or should I say 1-for-2, but maybe it could get worse as Vote is going in, looking at Stuart, but the sustain comes into play to keep him topped up in time. Dardes now with the double kill, getting hold of Stuart. Can he get away from SOT? The stun over the wall from Neil was good enough to peel for a little bit, but where are SOT's cooldowns? 8 seconds on Dardes as he needs that leap away. The walls will not slap, but he'll dash towards them to make it 4-for-3 across the map. 8 minutes in.
Man, SOT's rotation comes up for his team in a huge way there. Stuart survives much longer than he likely should have. That Earthen Fury heal, making sure that Vote has to work a little bit harder for his kills, does extend that engagement very long for the Solar Scarabs, but at the end of the day, it still is the Oni Warriors coming out ahead. Unfortunate for Bobby. That might have been like the slowest kill I've ever seen. I watched that entire thing in slow motion, frame by frame, inbound, got to feel every single auto.
I'll be real, when I was watching him doing the dance at first, I just walked past it, and then I went, hang on a second.
Big.
I think that Riptide is really catching both sides, the left and the right of the avenue. There's no escape for you in that situation, and you just got to accept your demise. The good news is, though, there was a bit of a return kill from the Scarabs rotation. It's good to see. They were answering the overextension from Warriors there. Think if anything, it was more Vote getting very aggressive again of like, well, I guess we can go back in.
Yeah, Vote could have just walked out and taken the small win, but you go for the larger plays here on the SPL stage. So 4-3 is going to be the standings as of now, and the Oni Warriors sitting with a comfortable 1,000 gold lead 9 minutes in. The Solar Scarabs doing a much better job keeping this game tight in the early.
Yeah, even though that did hurt the Scarabs a little bit on that invasion there, I think if anything, Stuart was the one that found a bit of a win as Vote continues the aggression in the Stuart lane here. And I say Stuart found a bit of a win because he got 2 of the kills in the engagement. He continued to be able to farm up and get some free farm without his support being there. So keep an eye on what Stuart can do in this ROM as the game goes on. Although the way Vote's playing right now, it's very aggressive.
Yeah, Vote seems to be playing with a good deal of confidence at this point. That was a incredibly proactive ultimate. Maybe a little bit overzealous, thinking that Stuart would try and dig in his heels and take that fight. Speaking of the Hunters, though, it seems to be the new age build for Vote. Has the Crusher in the first slot. We've seen Aussie in second slot. I've seen a couple of guys go for the Executioner as well. Whereas Stuart is going, yeah, Xe seems to have a slight resurgence recently as inbound. Dashes in, gets his Abduct stunned out. Stuart, though, going for Transcendence immediately into the bow build. I don't know if it's going to be Maybe we see the Icavale for that additional power. Maybe it's going to be the Odysseus' bow for this team fight presence, or considering he has no penetration in his build right now, could even be the Atalantas.
And I think that's the one question mark, is where does the pen come in now on this Rama build? Because he's going to need it eventually. I do agree you could probably go for Icavale for an even bigger spike. Odibo is something you're going to definitely use late game for sure. Getting it this early, I mean, it will help with a bit of wave clear. We'll see how it goes though. Fury though, started up by the Scarabs and SOT on zoning with to keep Neil away. Meanwhile, Scream's going to engage all the way in with that ultimate to keep the pressure rolling on Neil. Neil will drop the Riptide though to buy some time, or should I say the ultimate to keep him peeled away. The Gold Fury's reset and now Warriors can go to town, and Nika's looking at Scream.
Nice dazzling offensive, finds the double stun, and the rest of the boys right behind him. Vote credit for the kill and a Scream, and now Cuvo Fred leading the charge.
SOT had to blink away, but still being chased down by the remnants of the Warriors members. 4 members strong. The Horsey's in the shop. He's going to charge on in, looking towards SOT, and SOT just eats that, as does Stuart. No real chance though for the Warriors here to look at the Gold Fury, I feel. Especially with the 3 members of Scarabs still healthy enough to contest.
Vote a little bit too low HP to want to stick around in this one, and the Solar Scarabs benefiting from the Oracle Vision on the Gold Fury proper means that the Oni Warriors do have to exercise a little bit of caution. But what an expensive engagement from the Solar Scarabs. That was Piercing Moonlight, Earthen Fury, and Astral Barrage all committed to try and shut down this Yamoja.
And to be clear, he lived after those.
Yeah,
and
you
then
gotta
they
get
found
those.
the kill, yeah.
SOT now looking for a little bit of a tower dive. Vote in some trouble.
And Vote is in trouble with SOT wrapping around the battle, like you said, but Stuart took a brunt of the damage there. Neil now turns up, and Vote held his own just in time. The walls did not collapse from SOT, as the Insaguri kept him alive. All the while, though, Pyromancer was taken on that right-hand side of the map by the Warriors.
And now that 1,000 gold lead before that team fight has quickly extended itself closer to 2,500. Experience, though, maybe telling a little bit more of the story. 4,000 in favor of the Order team. You see it reflected inside of the Soul Lane. 2 levels for Nika. We see a level inside of the support 2, actually, now, as Neomon ticks over to level 10 inbound. Still sitting comfortably at 8, but otherwise, a good deal of parity, except for Vote, who just now ticks over to 12.
And I think for me, it's the solo lane experience more so than the support experience. Because supports generally, when your team's losing or having a bad time of things, you're going to be 2 levels down. That is the gap you're allowed as a
Support
support player.
excuses. What are these Johns?
Listen, over the years, it's always been you're 2 levels down in support if your team's losing to the other support, and that's just fine.
That's
Any
fair.
more than that, you've got an issue, right?
Okay.
If it's 3, if it's 4, then you're like, okay, what's going wrong with you? You're either overplaying in these fights, or you're just not farming enough.
Yeah, what would you say is going wrong now? Is
They're not
Neomon
sharing the
or
farm with
inbound?
me enough, that's
Oh, you
all.
think Bobby's just being a little bit too generous with the farm?
Correct.
All right, I could see that.
Yeah.
Cuvo Fred, though, getting involved onto Stewart. Rollout should be enough to get him out of range, and Stewart feeling very safe inside of that tower. What isn't safe is the Gold Fury.
Well, not with Nika being over here too, and you can just see Scream limping back and getting his speed up on the right-hand side. It's going to be too little too late here, I feel, for the Scarabs to get in a contest.
So fast.
As the Warriors will extend their gold lead now to the match that of their experience.
Solar Scarabs are grouped up here, and the Oni Warriors seem like they're willing to take an engagement right here. SOT misses out on the pillar and now isolated and surrounded.
And they're looking at SOT, who's a very tanky target, but there's the walls coming through from Neil to slow them down. And crushes on in, getting inbound's life, who did at least get his
What's
ultimate
going on?
off. Veronic, though, gets it on Cubo from his overextension. Scream's Ache is bought him so much time as the focus is still on SOT, who is barreling in towards Vote. The sustain from Neil comes to play as Don is able to wrap around the back on that Tiamat, goes unchecked. And another couple of kills, at least one, in favor of the Warriors there in that skirmish in the jungle.
Gold Fury in 2 for the 1 death of Cuvo Fred is a great trade, but maybe
Could
add
be
another
worse.
one onto the count. Veronic getting overly
Oh,
involved.
but he blinks in. He's still trying to find the kill on Dardes. Realizes he can't escape Nika.
Stewart.
But he can't find Dardes either. Stuart doesn't have his ultimate available in this Rama to really cause a problem there. So Dardes will live to fight another day. As at 40 minutes in, all we've seen is action.
Yeah, what was it? Just 1,000 gold just 4 minutes ago has now expanded itself to 4,000, matching up with the experience. I caught that call, Hindi. That was pretty good. And props to you for being able to follow that team fight. That's just hectic, man.
We were talking earlier, how many years have I seen this game? Like, I know the difference.
Tsukiomi's new. He's like jumping around the engagement.
The experience
I mean,
of gold
there's
gains.
tornadoes.
Experience of gold gains have been the same for
Okay,
years. You know?
okay,
They're not
fair
really
enough.
changed that much. You get a Gold Fury, guarantee you got about, what, 1,000 plus gold in your inventory? Sure.
Feels pretty good for the Oni Warriors at this point, who now have free reign of the entirety of the map. Unfortunately for them, Pyromancer has not respawned just yet, so they have to wait for another POI to come back up and force the Solar Scarabs to take an engagement. But it may have been a slower start this time around in Game 2 for the Oni Warriors, but 15 minutes in, we find ourselves in the exact same position. Oni Warriors, with a very commanding lead, can do just about no wrong on the map. Duo Lane now starting to feel that pressure as Stuart, well, you're not allowed to back right there.
No, and he's just going to keep the pressure rolling on this left-hand side. Look at where Cubo Fred is. Nika's going to be under threat on the right, though, as Scarabs start to group there. The Tier 1 tower on the left-hand side is definitely susceptible here. And as you said, should probably be forfeit with how they're grouped.
Never mind.
On the left-hand side. Warriors now looking at the red buff too. But it looks like Stuart did end up sticking around there, so we'll get the farm.
That's the classic Barracuda play. When Barracuda is getting camped inside his lane, we'll sit inside the Tier 2, wait for them to leave, and then head back over to the Tier 1 to defend it. And Stuart has taken a play from his book, now rejoined by the rest of his team on the left side jungle. Oni Warriors, though, they're looking for the invade.
It is the Warriors, though, with the advantage of this game. You can just see how aggressive they're being in the jungle path in at the moment. Like you said, there's nothing really in the jungle for them to take in the middle area. The Golf Fury down, Pyro down. So why not just keep trying to pressure, stifle some of this experience gain from the enemy side of the map? Scorpion even being looked at the moment as Scarabs just trying to farm his 3 as much as they can.
SOT is not making any rotation towards this fight, whereas Nika is hovering around the center, so if an engagement does spring up on the left-hand side, there will be a solo lane advantage to the Oni Warriors. That said, Solar Scarabs say, look, we're behind at this point. Purple buff's not that valuable. We'll go ahead and let this one fall. Stuart, just try your best and find some farm inside of the lane, and that's exactly what he's trying to do. Nika, though, he is just a menace.
He's got a dirty build as well. In my opinion, this is disgusting, because once he gets to you, you are stuck with him on your face.
Yeah, he's faster than you just because of Amaterasu's first ability. Now you're slowed thanks to the Frostbound Hammer, and he's attacking you often because of the Berserker's Shield. And even if you do decide to turn on him, he's got some great stats to stick around in these fights.
Veronic under pressure here in the jungle as Nika dashes in, and there's good damage from the walls from Neil. Nika's still looking for it, though, but the Beacon Aegis, as you mentioned, used by Veronic there. Walls hit onto Neil, but the Riptide will give him some separation again as another bit of pressure comes flowing through from the Warriors. It costs them a blink from Nika there, and it costs them the ultimate, but they do get Beads Aegis, as you said, out of Veronic, and a Pyromancer too.
Scream now on the chase, trying to use the Piercing Moonlight to finish off Neilma. Not quite enough damage, and the Harpy blocks the 1.
But there's a little bit of help from that ultimate coming through from Bobby to keep Scream alive. Bad news bears, though, his Dardas was there for the revive to pick up a kill, making it support for jungle. And now the chase is on. Vote making this rotation in. Rama is over here too from Stuart. The horse goes in from Vote looking for the damage and gets it on Stuart. Vote dashes it on Stuart and gets the kill. He's going for the backline in Veronic as Bobby limps away to the right. SOT peels to the left. And it will be the sacrificial lamb Bobby for Vote to get a double kill and leave 4 members of the Warriors in good standing on the right side of the map.
The Solar Scarabs just try their best to find something in a bad situation. Pyromancer having already fallen, the Solar Scarabs say, okay, we have to win the fight. We got to fight now, and that's just not the right call, especially considering how far ahead the Oni Warriors are. Had you not taken that engagement, you're not worried about this Fire Giant going down 17 minutes and 50 seconds of the game. It would have just been a reset, but instead, 3 members of the Scarabs die, and the Oni Warriors, they put fire on 5.
I think in one sense, credit where it's due that Veronic didn't have Beads or Aegis in that engagement and survived it. But at the same time, that's the one you'd expect to fall in the engagement when the rest of them were alive, you know, and still in a better relic situation. And that could be one of the reasons why Veronic couldn't get as involved as maybe he wanted to in that, with how safe he had to play.
Yeah, Nika is stripping away those defensive relics so early on in the engagement. Does have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the team fight, but now we get a little bit of a build roundup. Solar Scarabs jungler, Scream, just now finishing up stacking his Transcendence, 18.5 minutes in the game, will be benefiting from a little bit more attack spear cooldown reduction rather inside of his build, so maybe that Piercing Moonlight will be available a little bit more often. That said, though, the Oni Warriors playing with house money, about 7,000 gold in the lead, can do no wrong, and there's plenty of towers left on the map. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just gold caches waiting to be collected.
Well, look at how much of an island Stu is on this left-hand side. The good news is he's buying time for his team who are looking at a tier 2
Might
tower.
be out. Oh, never mind.
Great riptide from Neil, though, as you've cast a curse him there at the tail end to bring that down. Nika, though, dealing with 3 on this right-hand side. Has reinforcements and Dardas coming through. And Scream still engaging in, looking for the kill. Has the ultimate from Bobby, too, to continue this chase on under the tier 2 tower. Dardas now under threat, too. But maybe he can hold a Scream. He will do, at least. But it costs him his Aegis and his life as well. The tier 2 on the right will stand. The tier 2 on the left will fall. Overall, I'd say that's still a win for the Warriors because the tower falls.
The tower does fall, but they lose out on 2 Fire Giant buffs. Nika and
point.
Dardes now losing out on that additional HP 5, power, MP 5,
I would say
sustain.
that's even them.
Yeah, I'd say so. Solar Scarabs, that was a very interesting call to have 4 members grouped up on the right-hand side trying to isolate Nika. Do finally put him down and take out Dardes on the tail end as well. But now adding to the Primal Fury to the list, still Fire Giant on 3 members, one of which being your Hunter, and you're not really in a dire straits here on the Oni Warriors. You don't need to take out any of these Phoenixes. Instead, just strip the towers, go for the neutral objectives, push your lead even further. I'd say that they're sitting in a very comfortable spot.
Well, with how this game's been going so far, I will say these meta changes that have been happening through from what was released on Tuesday for the most part, or Wednesday I should say, these meta changes have really seen these junglers adapt and see a lot more assassins now in the jungle again. And I think we've seen a different sort of meta shift in terms of who's the carry on these teams. There's a little bit more towards these junglers.
Yeah, it's a meta that I'm very happy to be a part of and very happy to have the opportunity to cast here. Hinduman Junglers finally unleashed in Phase 3, and it's because of the maze changes. Transcendence heats some buffs. I mean, Heartseeker gets a buff as well. It's never been a better time to be an assassin main.
Well, as you can see, we have a couple of technical issues. We'll be back in game as soon as we can. For the most part, though, we just get to sit here and go, Warriors looking great. We've seen Neil move from Canada over towards Georgia now, so he'll be in studio a little bit more often sooner than later. But his play has been a lot better, I feel, already. And you can start to see the difference that could be made.
It's almost as if they're just playing with more confidence. The shot caller being in the same state as the boys feels pretty good, and now the Oni Warriors in a position where they can try and find somebody slacking inside the jungle. Baronic gets his back stopped, but that should spell the end of this one. Oni Warriors, they still got plenty of time to play with Fire Giant for at least another minute or so, and 3 towers still standing. Gotta think that can't be the case much longer.
Do you feel the Scouts can defend a Tier 2 tower in this engagement, though? I mean, Tier 1, I think, should be surrendered, as you can see the engagement happening there in mid. But the Tier 2s, do you stand at those, or do you wait for Phoenix defense?
At least put up a soft defense on the Tier 2s, considering you've got a Merlin, for my money, one of the best defensive mages inside the game. He just locks down entire lanes with just too much damage, in my mind. So the Solar Scarabs are going to have a 5-man grouping inside of this Tier 2 tower. The Oni Warriors are going to have to work pretty hard if they want to take this one out, but they've got options available to them. Right side Tier 2 already has a minion wave pushed up to it.
And speaking of that, you can see Cuba Fred just starting to drift in that direction now. Put some pressure elsewhere on the map, at least find one. If all 5 of the Scouts are going to group together, looks like we're going to see Scream do this rotation over now. The Nika sniffs out as well. They might be able to find Scream in a 2v1 if they're not careful there. And that's forcing Bobby, which is opening up the mid lane Tier 2 instead. All it is trying to move the troops around as you want if you're the Warriors with this FG.
But the Solar Scarabs have done a good job of buying time. As of now, this Fire Giant does not have much left on it, and the Oni Warriors have not taken either of these Tier 2 towers as of yet. That might spell the end of the attempt, but Pyromancer on the respawn, Nika already there. The Oni Warriors can still push this lead a little bit further. Not that they really need it. 9,000 gold, 21 minutes in, feels pretty good.
It definitely is. I mean, when you get to 10k is where you're like, well, that's 2k per player, which is pretty much an item.
It's like a whole item.
At that point. When it's under that, it's like 1,500, you're like, yeah, sure, a Tier 2, you know? You get 25 extra power, you get 15 extra MP5 on those items. It definitely is when you get to see a full item lead that the real disparity starts to creep in.
And we're not there just yet about anywhere inside the builds. We do get another chance to have a little bit of a build roundup, and it was going to be Aussie into Wind Demon Dominance for vote. So going for that exact same build, that Wind Demon maybe just saying, hey guys, if you want to on the other side, go ahead, build your Spectral, but this is a penetration build. Make no mistake about it. Stewart, on the other end, still going for that very standard Hunter build, but worth noting, still 0 penetration. Odysseus bow, kin size, you got decent yellow damage output, good AoE inside of the team fight. Sure, you're shredding HP, but as far as raw defense stats go, the Oni Warriors are going to get a lot of mileage from it, at least when they're fighting Stewart.
That's a very good point indeed. At least for the front line, they'll be able to stand and bang a little bit harder up against that Rama for the time being. But their health will be shredded by the chins at least, which will come into play. Both teams now waiting for the Fire Giant to spawn. Left-hand side, Stewart's just going to push out that wave, try and catch up to Vote's level 20. He's still got a 2-level deficit there as he'll fall back, but the FG now pulled and leashed by the Warriors.
And it's burning quickly. He's actually getting really lucky with these crits. Fire Giant down to
He's gonna
10%. SOT has to try, but is not successful. Only Warriors credit.
And Stewart wasn't even in the area to really make a part of that. The snipes could have come up big for them, but they're also not feeling confident to engage that either, it feels like. They were like, nope, we have to surrender this. Maybe with how the last Tier 2 Fire Giant defense went, they feel confident enough to be like, no, we can hold here.
We'll see if that's the case. Last time it was only Fire Giant on 3 members, and it was less than a minute now. Fire Giant on 5. Gold already spent up, now pushing 11,000. In the lead of the Oni Warriors should be an opportunity to put up a defense.
They see Nika in the mid lane here, the Scarabs, and that's why they step up towards him. And Neil taking a brunt of damage this time round. His health bar's been shredded, and his ultimate will not keep him alive. Nika now into the fray, looking to maybe come over the wall if he wants to. And Cubo Fred up downs, but dies to Scream still. Nika tries to separate the backline and keep Stu out of the frame, does well to do so. SOT on the Scream in the front side, causing some problems and have to be kited away by Nika, who's walled off. But the health bars of the Scarabs is too low. And even though they lost Cuvo and Neil Mar, it looks like Warriors should at least be able to get a tier 2 on the right-hand side.
You're right, Hindu. The tier 2 defense is looking good for the Solar Scarabs. Able to shut down Neil Mar off that initial. The rest of the Oni Warriors had backed up a fair bit. Neil Mar still leaving himself high and dry on that tier 2 tower line. Gets abducted, gets isolated, and loses his life for his efforts, leaving the rest of the Warriors kind of scattered to the breeze. Cuvo Fred isolated in the jungle and shut down by Scream.
I like the shot calling from Scarabs there, though, because I think it shows you how much they respect Nika being around. They see Nika in the mid lane and they're like, we can fight this. But when Nika's there, like, we can't fight this, we have to run. And now it's Nika versus the Scarabs at the Gold Fury. He's walled in place. Has to use the beads to give him some separation. The Gold Fury still taking some time, though. Vote is here alongside him. Respawn from Neil, and Dot is on the way too. As Vote is engaged on the backside, it's Scream. And a bit too deep here to take some damage, but will still be alive. Nika off to the right-hand side will escape as Vote is taken down by SOT for a second. Scream, meanwhile, will also escape. It's SOT that's just hanging around too long as the rest of his team retreat, and he's punished, and this could now be a Fury.
Yeah, SOT so deep on the Oni Warriors side of the map. The rest of his team legitimately just trying their best to limp back to base, and he got a little bit too proactive. Shut down immediately. Oni Warriors now Gold Fury inside the pocket, still sitting with a pretty massive gold lead, and we're at least able to strip away that right-hand side tier 2 tower, so only one tier 2 still standing between the Oni Warriors and the exposed birds of the Solar Scarabs. But we've been in this position before. 3 members with Fire Giant in a siege situation. The Solar Scarabs have been able to stop them the last 2 times, but now without SOT, we'll see how well their defense fares.
Checking in with Relic situation. Some of the carries are very much without their Relics this time round. Both members of the Scarabs, though, in the mid and the Hunter role do have beads available. Neil Mar get a front line, take some Phoenix damage, but all the while this is leaving Nika 1v1 with a Phoenix. Baronic's coming over here to try and deal with that. But now that Bobby's turned up, it's open separation in the mid lane for the pressure to continue. Nika's going to slip through the portal gated area back to safety after doing the damage to that left-hand Phoenix. Warriors couldn't siege 5v5, so what they do? Split the difference.
Yeah, Nika does it all on his own on the left-hand side. This is why, by the way, when you asked me last game who was my standout player, it's Nika. It's because he's making plays like this. I mean, you said it yourself. The Scarabs don't want to fight when he's around, and when he is around, he's taking Phoenixes alone.
That's fair. I mean, but in game 1, I was like, hey, who do you think did well? And for the first 15 minutes of the game, Nika was in the solo lane. You're like, yeah, it's Nika.
Well, it's because once Nika left the solo lane, they started winning.
That's fair. God, solo lanes are so dull. The first 10 minutes they do nothing, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, these solo lanes are amazing."
Yeah,
you can't hit that ult?
Yeah, no, that roll's not for me. You can't leave me alone inside a lane that long.
I get too bored. Fred, I just want to fight.
Well, he's left alone in the jungle.
Good route though from Cubo Fred to buy some time. However, he has to ult away after SOT with the follow-up. Now that ult's on cooldown for a while, alongside that of Neil Mars. Does give a bit of a window to Scarabs to play aggressive, but there's not a whole lot on the map for them to really look at here. It's going to be Pyromancer. A pick on Neil would be great at this stage, though, just to relieve some of this pressure. As the fire minions start to pour on this left-hand side, you see the ping go down there. Pyromancer now pulled by Scarabs will go down relatively quick. Daughters looking for a cheeky steal over the wall. Won't be able to find it on the Tiamat this time round. But with Nika in tow, the pressure is now on Stewart again. Stewart's got both relics available and needs to use the beads early on. SMT deals with Daughters on the left-hand side. And Nika took more damage than bargained for. Scream comes on in, looking for the secure, but the shells and shields coming through to cause some problems. A good revive onto Scream from Bobby, but it's not going to be enough to keep him alive as Cubo forgets the kill. SOT separated by Daughters and Neil as well. And now 3 members of Scarabs are running for their lives. But Warriors are on the flank around the corner.
Daughters now has himself 3 members inside the net. Stewart caught out.
And now with him falling down, Bobby's going to probably die to minions there unless Vote wants to kill himself. And he'll take it too. Last on the list will be Baronic, who falls down to Cubo Fred. And it looks like this could just be the end of the game. Both teams last week lost to the Titans, looking for bounce-back victories, and, well, it's going to be the Warriors here today that find the victory over the Solar Scarabs, and solid performance succession.
Yeah, Oni Warriors, man, it didn't seem like they had to break a sweat whatsoever inside of this one. The Solar Scarabs generally are a team that will push whoever they're playing against up to the limit. They play to the level of their opposition regardless. If they're playing against a lower-seeded team, they look a little bit worse. If they're playing against the top of the pack, they look about as good for the most part. This set, though, is the exception to the rule. The Solar Scarabs legitimately get run over.
Yeah, a tough set for Scarabs there, I feel, as well, because the Warriors are on the up and up, in my opinion. They
are.
They took a game off the Bolts last week, and now they've got to find a bit more traction here. Only 2 weeks into the SPL, though, in Phase 3, and everything's really important. We'll break down that set, though, after this break and move on to the one in studio with Leviathans and the Dragons.
I gave up dabbing for Lynn.
Cool. No more dabbing for Final. He looked at me and said, I'm going to be on that stage next year. I'm going to become a world champion. Ripping through, Titan, down, fall 3, a double kill myself.
Wait, what did it win?
You win the respect.
You're telling me an alien wore this?
Perfect. Okay, that was a good cut.
Messaging him to mute.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course, and I can probably watch a stream on the side.
Content's gonna look good.
Pretty good, pretty good.
If you want to catch up on any of the behind-the-scenes action that goes on in the Smite Pro League, you can always check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SmitePro to catch all of the interviews, the 1v1s, anything that we do when we're kicking it with the pros on our Mondays, or any of the other things that go on behind the scenes, whether it be things about roster apocalypse or just talking to the pros in general and getting their opinions about different things like cats versus dogs or pancakes versus waffles. There's all kinds of crazy things that we get to talk about the pros with that you can check out at youtube.com/SmitePro. Oni Warriors come out with a big win here today in game number 2, taking the set over the Solar Scarabs, Gormizer. It's a big look for them as we move later into the weeks for SPL.
Very similar to game number 1. They have some really good early game picks, although matched more stride for stride by the Scarabs for a long time, but you can see just ever so slightly those small advantages out of the fights where it's, maybe a 3-for-2 trade. All of those really starting to stack upon each other until it gets to the point where things start to get a little more out of hand. I think there was a good early rotation from Solar Troll that helped things out for the Scarabs, but once that kind of stopped happening or stopped being as much of an advantage, it was a lot of really good pickup. We had really good Rivers rebukes, and of course Riptides as well, coming down from Neil Ma that were just absolutely insane to watch. This Emoja really benefited this team in terms of the control and the CC that it was able to bring. There's even a moment where I think someone was about to die and just barely gets clipped by the stun from Neil, and he ends up saving his teammate. So a lot of just fantastic plays from the Emoja. And that translated well to make Dardes and Vote look really, really good. Dardes, I think, had a great slash line and a really good performance, but we got to see Vote once again on this Hachiman just have the time of his life, it felt like. Really good shots, really good aggressive plays, and really heads up for where he is. I mean, we've seen a lot of these ults and a lot of Hachiman plays where sometimes you got to disengage, sometimes you got to run away, you got to play it safe. He was engaging with his team. He was in the front line for some of it and really causing a lot of trouble for the Scarabs. It just didn't seem like they had everything together that they wanted to in order to answer back.
One of the key things to pull here, Vote going 7-1 this game. I think he went 7-1 last game too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So picking up 14 kills, 2 deaths, and however many throw and assists you want to throw out there, another 27,000 player damage game from him, so another very high damage game. But kind of going back towards Neil with the Shimoja, it's been talked a lot about, with the ultimate getting the nerf, the passive getting a nerf. Riptide never did get a nerf. Nope. And that's one of the big consistencies with top-end Yamoja players is their ability to place those Riptides effectively. And that one play specifically against Inbound, I just have to point out that against almost any other god, that play can't happen, but because Khepri is so wide, you can get it right there in the center of that corridor, and that's just a guarantee. I mean, you saw Inbound panicking. He's like, where can I go? Am I able to go to the right? Can I go to the left? No, there's no path for me to go. I guess I just have to sit here and deal with the damage, but Neil had some solid Riptides through and through. The one that was the Tier 2 tower dive where he ends up pulling the Hunter right back towards him. Just solid play overall by him. Even Nika onto Amaterasu getting a very quick and a very quiet first blood. I mean, I know that we had walked back over towards the green room. We had a couple of things we had to go do, and then we walked back in. It's barely 2 minutes in, and I look at the TV and I see a first blood, and I went, oh, what in the world just happened?
Yeah, I think it's just a really good pickup from the Warriors, and a very important win for them, not just being able to get a first win for this portion of the phase online, but also to be able to beat out the Scarabs, a really good showcase for them after they had, again, a great performance up against specifically the Bolts, and then maybe a little more of a lackluster performance later on in the week, so this is a really good one to get under their belts.
Well, with our post-game, we always have a nice little interview, so let's sit down with Nika from the Oni Warriors and talk to him a little bit. And Neil Moss. So we get Nika and Neil. We get the double special for this. Congratulations on your win, guys. And Nika, it's, I guess for you, it's always good to have your support, Neil Ma, now here in the house with you guys. But let's talk a little bit about 8.9. This is the jungle meta. I talked to Neil a little bit about how maybe support's changed up with the relics. How does it feel for you over in Soul Lane with the new change-ups?
I'd say it's pretty similar still. I'd say the biggest difference is I can maybe play some warriors, really force the issue there. But I'd still say Guardian's pretty strong right now, but getting closer to a good solo lane, I'd say.
Well, talking a little bit about those warriors, the Amaterasu didn't get played at all. Phase 1 didn't get played at all, really, Phase 2. What was just kind of the thought process on bringing them out here in Game 2?
I've been playing in ranked with Mannequin, and when you're against a Terror, you kind of just get to free farm. You get like a pretty free laning phase. So I was thinking like maybe Wukong, and then I was like, hey, maybe I'll just play the Amber. It's going well in ranked, and the people want to see us, so I thought I'd throw it out.
That seemed to work out really well for you. Your next matchup is going to be against the Camelot Kings. The Solar Scarabs were able to take them to game 3, kind of put a little bit of a struggle for them. You have any expectations going up to the Kings next week?
I still think like even with the ping restrictions for the other two, like we can still take games and win games against these teams. I mean, I'm really confident with how like we play on game days mainly. Our scrims could use a little bit of work, but game day, especially when this guy is playing properly, we got some chances.
It's always got to make sure that Neil is playing properly to get those big wins. Well, congratulations on your win, Nika, and best of luck in your next matchups.
Thank you.
Well, it just seems it's good vibes across the board here, Gormizer, for the Oni Warriors. They got Neil in the house, makes everybody feel a little bit better, and now we get to see maybe a little bit of shakeups in the solo, and you kind of heard him highlight it. And we're getting closer towards that proper. I can kind of finally start playing some other stuff in solo lane thought process.
Yeah, I think it was, what was it, Benji last week in an interview was like, nah, I'm still going to be playing Serb next week. Like, we already know what's going to be happening. Like, he sounded very resigned to his Guardians. I think Nika's showcasing, and what we've seen this weekend showcasing, it's a little wider this time around, makes things interesting.
It's been an interesting start to the weekend so far with our now third set of the week complete with the Oni Warriors getting a 2-0 over the Solar Scarabs. We now come to our second match of the day, or fourth of the week, but our second in-studio match is the bigger highlight to take from here. The Jade Dragons and the Atlantis Leviathans here in studio playing for our second set of the day, and if it's anything remotely the same as what we saw yesterday, Gormizer, I'm expecting big things coming from these. Let's take a look at the standings real quick before we jump around here and see kind of where everything shakes up. It's going to put the Solar Scarabs down at the bottom 0-3, and with the Oni Warriors their win, and now puts them comfortably in 6th seed for the time being, but still room for things to shake up here with this next match.
And you have to remember every single one of these matters, not just because, top 2 is very important, but realistically, everyone's watching who you're beating, right? To know who exactly you want to throw into different group stages to try and make things as convoluted for them as possible. And so knowing that that was a 2-0, knowing that the Scarabs pushed the Kings to 3 games, that's kind of information that you're going to need if you're the top 2 seeds in the next coming weeks to make sure that you can choose some group stages that cause a lot of trouble for everybody involved.
Yeah, there's always going to be some shakeups when it comes to those group stages because of how all the seeding is going to work through. This is a big one, though, because both these two teams are tied for first seed, but only one of them can come out with the win today, and only one of them can maintain that first seed. Who's it going to be? Well, we might as well go ahead and grab some snacks, go to the bathroom, and we'll be back in just a few minutes to get you guys kicked off for our second set of the day.